Welcome into another episode of the PFF College Football Show. Max Chadwick alongside Dalton Wasserman here. And you see by the helmets on the desk, it is time to preview every single Power 4 team heading into the 2025 season. And we're starting off with the SEC. Dalton, giving every single one of these 16 SEC teams their own in-depth preview, about 10 minutes each, or maybe even longer for each of those teams, just kind of going over the biggest strength of the team, biggest weakness of the team, quarterback breakdown, their best offensive player outside of the quarterback, their best defensive player, and their bottom line, including betting the over or under for their win total right now.
Absolutely, Max. It's just good to see the helmets back on the desk, isn't it? And we're a little over 6 weeks away from college football starting. Now it starts to feel like, as we get into these previews, the start of the season is coming, right? It's imminent. We're finally going to get to the fun part. Instead of making all lists and rankings and everything we have to do during the offseason, we start just talking about the teams and the games themselves. It's the funnest part of the year.
Absolutely. I cannot wait. We did this last year for every single one of the Power 4 teams, and you guys responded really, really well to those previews, so we have to do it once again here. And now we're doing a live show for each conference. So this week will be SEC. Next week will be the Big 10. The week after that, the Big 12. And then, of course, rounding it out with the ACC. And, of course, yes, Notre Dame will be getting their own preview as well in those team previews. Of course, I want to remind you guys, too, all the stats we're talking about today with each of these team previews are available to you guys with a PFF Plus subscription at subscribe.pff.com today. Dalton, it's going to be a very, very long show, about a 2.5-hour show probably. So let's get into it right now with the first team we're talking about today, going in alphabetical order, starting off with a banger, the Alabama Crimson Tide. And let's face it, Dalton, it was kind of a disappointing year for Kalen DeBoer in his first year as Alabama's head coach, replacing the greatest coach of all time in Nick Saban. They went 9-4 last year. That was their most losses in a season since Nick Saban's first year on the job in 2007. Even with a disappointing year in 2024, though, expectations are still sky high for the Crimson Tide in 2025. They should have one of the best defenses in college football, with stars at every single position. The offense has one of the brightest stars in the country in Ryan Williams, who's the cover athlete of EA College Football 26. There is a question mark at quarterback, which we'll get into in a little bit, but Dawn, really the biggest strength of this team probably is the defense.
I would agree, right? We had a top 10 player at every position on defense with this team. You look at their defensive line, starting with LT Overton and Tim Keenan. You look at their linebackers with Deontay Lawson and Justin Jefferson and Nakai Hill-Green. Then you talk about the secondary with Keon Sabb, Bray Hubbard, Damani Jackson, Cam Calhoun, all just a loaded secondary. What you have is a true three-layer defense that could be the best defense in the country if everything goes right for them. I think the offense is going to take some time to transition with the quarterback situation, but their defense is going to give them a chance to win every single week. It might be a different coach now in Kalen DeBoer than Nick Saban. We saw a little bit of struggle last year, but the tradition at Alabama of having a great defense is going to continue in 2025. To me, that's the foundation of their team.
Yeah, listen, Alabama was one of 4 schools in America who had one of my top 10 D-lines, linebacker units, and secondaries. And as Dolan just mentioned there as well, Alabama is the only school in America that had a top 10 player at every single defensive position too. Now, the biggest question mark for Alabama going into next year is their quarterback situation right now. Now, they do have talent in that quarterback room. I don't want to say that right now. They have a couple former 5-star recruits at quarterback. Jalen Moreau, though, now with the Seattle Seahawks. The favorite to win the job right now, I'll talk about him in just a second, is Ty Simpson, redshirt junior, is a 5-star recruit coming out in 2022. Sat on the bench for 3 years at Alabama. But you also have their redshirt sophomore, Austin Mack, and a true freshman in Keelan Russell. And Keelan Russell was a top 5 overall recruit in the 2025 high school class. Alabama does still have a top 10 quarterback room in college football in my rankings, which is kind of ironic considering we're saying it's the biggest question mark right now. But just the lack of experience at quarterback, Dalton, is probably their biggest question mark.
It is, and you talk about it interesting with Ty Simpson being the incumbent kind of here and the favorite to start, because you have Austin Mack, who came over with Kalen DeBoer from Washington, and you have a 5-star true freshman in Keelan Russell. But Simpson appears to be the favorite. He was the number 2 guy behind Jalen Milroe last year. He's played sparingly over the last 2 years and put up a 75.5 passing grade. Not a lot of high leverage work, but I think what Simpson brings is he's a lot different than Milroe in the sense of he's going to win with timing and accuracy and throwing the ball on time vertically down the field. That's what Kalen DeBoer wants from his quarterbacks. We saw from Michael Penix at Washington. He's more used to having vertical passing quarterbacks, right, who can win from the pocket. I think Simpson can be that. I really like a lot of his throws in the intermediate range. So if they can get the run game going with Jam Miller Taylor, get Simpson in some play action situations early in the year. There's not a terrible runway their first 3 games. They do have to play Florida State and Wisconsin, which aren't easy games, but you really want him prepped up for that first conference game against Georgia. Now, what Simpson doesn't bring you is the elite athleticism that Milroe brought you in the design run game, right? He can run a little, he can scramble for a first down if he needs to, but Ty Simpson is going to win from the pocket. That's where Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Grubb's a big factor in this too. I think we need to mention Ryan Grubb being back under DeBoer as the offensive coordinator after a year with the Seattle Seahawks. I do wonder how much that plays a factor in the passing game. I think last year we saw when Alabama's passing game went cold, it's because Jalen Milroe held the football too long and wanted to scramble and improvise. Simpson's not going to do that. He's going to win from the pocket. He's going to win with accuracy.
It's worth mentioning, too, Ty Simpson was the number 2 quarterback coming out of high school, a 5-star recruit. The only one above him was Cade Klubnik, who we all think right now is the best quarterback in America going into next year. It's kind of weird, Dalton, to see a 5-star quarterback be willing to sit on the bench for 3 years at a school. Usually, after 1 or even 2 years on the bench, they transfer out of there, go to a different school. Ty Simpson has bided his time despite being a top 25 high school recruit coming out. So credit to him for doing that. I'm really excited to see if he can live up to that 5-star hype right now.
Well, it certainly helps to have a great offensive coach in Kalen DeBoer and then the just absolute stacked set of weapons that he has led by that top guy that we all know about.
Yeah, we got to talk about Ryan Williams right now. That's the offensive player spotlight. Should not be a surprise to anyone right here. The number 2 receiver in the country. He's on the cover of EA College Football 26, like I said before. He's the only one who's better than him is Jeremiah Smith, who's also gracing that cover with him. Ryan Williams had 865 receiving yards last year, second to Jeremiah Smith among all true freshmen, and second among all true freshmen over the last 3 years. Ryan Williams is a top 5 recruit coming out of high school. He led all true freshmen with 170 receiving yards after contact, and only Jeremiah Smith had more yards after the catch, more receiving touchdowns, and more yards per route run than Ryan Williams. Elite speed and elite body control at 6 feet tall, 175 pounds. Like I said before, he's our number 2 receiver in the country. He played all of last season. I know you've heard this time and time again, but he played all of last year at 17 years old. He'll be 18 years old for all of his sophomore year, 19 years old for all of his junior year, and he'll be 20 years old for all of his rookie year in the NFL. And Don, you even said that before, you see a lot of CeeDee Lamb in this game.
I do. The speed, the body control, the hands, the ability to win after the catch. I think he's going to have a lot more versatile role this year, and he's going to really, I think, enjoy catching passes from Ty Simpson, especially earlier in the play when the ball's getting thrown on time and in rhythm and in time for him to make plays after the catch. I think he's going to have a spectacular season.
So we said before, we have a top 10 player at every single defensive position for Alabama. So we had no shortage of players to choose from here, Don, but who are we going to spotlight for their defensive players?
I think for me, it's going to be LT Overton, the edge defender, because I think the one thing I'm not 100% sure of with this Alabama defense is this pass rush. Now, he is by far their best pass rusher. We'll see where the depth comes from, and he had a top 30 pass rush win rate last year. And Max, speaking of things we've heard before, talk about a guy spending his first 2 years at Texas A&M and then going to another school and finding some pass rush juice, right? That's what LT Overton did last year. If he can take another step and really be a superstar pass rusher, 2 things are going to happen. 1, Bama's going to have a top 3 to 5 defense in the country, and 2, he's going to find himself in next year's draft as a first-round pick, right? So he's a great run defender. Him and Tim Keenan are a brick wall in run defense up front, but Overton has to be their best pass rusher, and then the depth guys can fill in behind that. I think he can do that with a second year in this system. I think Overton really is. I could argue, they have a great unit in the secondary. They have a great unit at linebacker, but I could argue Overton's their most important player, if on defense at least, if they want to win a national championship.
Absolutely. Him and Tim Keenan form one of the best defensive lines in the country. My number 2 defensive line in America, only behind Clemson going into next year. All right, Dalton, bottom line time right now. What are you expecting out of Alabama? And let's also mention before, their win total by FanDuel Sportsbook is 9.5 right now. Are you taking the over or the under for Alabama?
I'm buying. I'm going over. I think they have enough talent where the playoffs should be the minimum here for this team. They were the first team that missed out last season. They had a boatload of talent last year and lost a couple of games they shouldn't have, obviously, to Vandy and Oklahoma especially, but they need to take care of business in those games as long as they figure out this quarterback situation, and likely Ty Simpson, if he is at least solid and he's throwing the ball on time for DeBoer and Grubb on the offensive side, I think the playoffs are the minimum, and I honestly expect them to compete for the SEC title.
I absolutely agree with that, too. I'm also taking the over for Alabama. Look at their schedule right now. They are at Georgia, like Dalton said, for their first game in the SEC. But other than that, I mean, they are pretty clearly better than almost everyone else in the schedule. LSU game's going to be tough. South Carolina is going to be tough as well at South Carolina. But LSU, you got at home. I'm taking the over. I think at worst 10-2. I just don't see this team going 9-3. In fact, Dalton, I would say right now, I think Alabama is the fourth best team in America right now. And I would say there are, in that inner circle that can compete for a national title, if Ty Simpson lives up to the hype as a former 5-star recruit, and he's a very experienced, or at least been there for a long time at Alabama, I really think with that elite defense and a great supporting cast on offense, with a great receiving core, the number one offensive line in the country in my opinion too, and a pretty good running back unit, if Ty Simpson can live up to that 5-star hype, Alabama can absolutely return to being a national title contender, and I'm also taking the over on the 9.5 win total for the Crimson Tide going into next year. Next school we're talking about is the Arkansas Razorbacks, who went 4-8 in 2023, and Sam Pittman was on the hot seat entering 2024, but he kind of rebounded really nicely with a 7-6 record last year. They also won the Liberty Bowl over Texas Tech. They also had an upset over a college football playoff team in Tennessee that year too. He'll likely need to produce similar results in 2025 to remain the head coach, and he'll likely rely on that guy you see on the left right there, Talon Green, the quarterback, to do so. He and Braylon Russell should form a really good rushing attack for the Razorbacks next year. A lot more concerns on defense right now, though. Only 5 of the 16 defenders who played at least 300 snaps last year are back with the team. And making matters worse, Arkansas has the second hardest schedule in the country, according to PFF's power rankings, too. They also have a game against national runner-up Notre Dame as a part of their non-conference slate, in addition to a pretty tough SEC slate, too. But, Dawn, what is the biggest strength of the Razorbacks right now?
I think the biggest difference that you saw last year was their quarterback, Talon Green, and we'll break it down in more detail. But what Arkansas has been under Sam Pittman is a team that runs and stop the runs, and there's been really – they've been missing the passing element before last year, and Talon Green came over from Boise State, and he was a much better passer than they had the previous year when KJ Jefferson was hurt and they were shuffling through some guys. Getting Green in the portal really gave them a lot of hope. I think when you saw that the most was the first 2/3 or so of the game against Tennessee when they pulled up that upset. What do you have, 4 big-time throws in that game, I think it was, before he got hurt, and they had to win with his backup. But Green, especially when you talk about the playmaking he gave them, they were missing that the previous year. They had it early in KJ Jefferson's career, but it went away. That dual threat at quarterback and a guy who can take those deep shots down the field, that's what really made the difference in this team, surprisingly making a bowl game last year.
Yeah, so obviously their biggest strength is their quarterback, and their biggest weakness is defending opposing quarterbacks too, because last year Arkansas had plenty of issues defending the pass. 104th in EPA per pass last year on defense, 114th in defensive grade on passing plays too. They also lost both of their starting edge rushers. One of them was a superstar in Landon Jackson, and those two guys were the only ones who had a 65 pass rush grade last year. And Arkansas only brought back 2 defensive backs who had at least 150 cover snaps last year, in Larry Worth III and Jaheim Singletary. But both those guys had sub-50 coverage grades too. So a lot of questions right now in that Arkansas defense with their pass rush and with their coverage unit. Dawn, I know you broke him down a little bit already. Talon Green, who I think right now is the number 11 quarterback in all of college football. Talk about more, why is he so good, and what are some of the drawbacks in his game right now?
Tools. He's 6'6", he's 230 pounds. He's got a cannon for an arm that can reach any throw on the field, and that's really what he uses to his advantage, right? When you talk about a 93.1 passing grade last year on 10-plus yard throws, that was the 10th best mark in the country, and he was the highest graded quarterback in the Power 4 on either rollouts or scrambles. So you're talking about a guy with serious athletic ability, big-time size. We hear a lot about Lenora Sellers over there at South Carolina with the big size and being able to improvise. Talon Green can do similar things, and he throws a really, really good deep ball. Now, the weaknesses, underneath accuracy, controlling the big arm, right, laying off of the fastball, and then there's times where he tries to extend too much. He had 12 fumbles last year that led all Power 4 players. So there's times when the playmaking can work to his detriment a little bit, but you have to understand he's a home run hitter on any play with the big body, the big arm, and deceptive speed for a guy that size.
Absolutely, and he'll have a great blind side protector too, and Corey Robinson II transferring in from Georgia Tech. So yes, Arkansas did lose their 2 best offensive linemen to the portal, and guard Joshua Braun and their center and Addison Nichols. But like I said, Corey Robinson was an elite pass blocker last year at Georgia Tech. He was actually second among all tackles in America with a 91 pass blocking grade last year. Also second among all tackles in America with an 87 pass blocking grade on true passage, which kind of shows, more of how good you are one-on-one in true passage situations last year. The only one ahead of him in both pass blocking grade and pass blocking grade in true pass sets was Wyatt Milam, who was taken in the third round of the 2025 draft by the Jacksonville Jaguars. Corey Robinson also only allowed a 1.1% pressure rate, second among all tackles in the Power 4. The only one above him was a first-round pick and Josh Simmons. So as a pass blocker, Dalton, the only two guys that are really above him in almost every metric are guys that are not going to be playing on Sundays.
Yeah, I really like Robinson's footwork. He's really light on his feet. I think he could use a little more power in the run game, but he's light on his feet. He moves well. And the interesting part about their offensive line is last year's left tackle, Fernando Carmona, is going to move inside to left guard so Robinson can play left tackle. So you're going to have a good offensive line again in Arkansas. And for a guy that holds the ball as long as Talon Green does, it's really good to have a guy like Corey Robinson coming in protecting the blind side.
Definitely. So I mentioned before, they lost a lot from their defense last year, but still on that defensive line is a pretty good D tackle they have there.
Yeah, and a guy to spotlight here, especially for a team that was 7th in the nation in run defense grade last year. How about their defensive tackle, Cameron Ball, who had a 71.7 PFF grade, but he's one of the better run stoppers in the country. 75 run defense grade in 3 straight seasons. You just really like the way he holds up at the point of attack. You talk about having those guys that make the rest of your front 7 better. A guy like Cameron Ball can do that. Right about now, I would say he's probably a mid to late day 3 prospect. If he gets a little bit better as a pass rusher, he could move up from that, but he's a solid run defender. He's a guy who just really makes it hard to run against Arkansas between the tackles. So basing everything around him, I think they got to find some edge help, of course, with Landon Jackson getting drafted to the Buffalo Bills. But as far as their run defense goes with Ball as the foundation, I'm not too worried about that. It's more about their secondary and seeing where some of those transfer guys on the back end can have success more so than last year.
Absolutely, yeah. The 9th most defensive stops for Cameron Ball last year among all D tackles in the Power 4. All right, Dawn, bottom line time. Do we think it'll be another bowl game year for Arkansas? And their win total right now is 5.5. So if you're taking the over, you do think they're going to make a bowl game. If you're taking the under, they're not making a bowl game. What do we think is the bottom line here for Arkansas?
This is a brutal schedule, man. This is tough to call because I'm looking at a schedule with Ole Miss, Tennessee, A&M, Auburn, LSU, Texas, Missouri.
And then Notre Dame.
Plus a Notre Dame game out of conference.
Even Memphis, too.
And at Memphis is not easy. You got kind of a proximity rivalry going on there, going at Memphis, and they're always a good team. Oh, this is tough. This is such a good schedule.
You want me to go first? Because I think I have my answer.
I know which way I'm leaning, but you go first. This is a hard one.
I'm going the under.
I think I'm going under. It feels like maybe 5-7 on this schedule.
I think even 4-8 is possible.
Maybe.
I hate saying that because I love Talon Green and some of the talent they have there. But man, it's according to PFF Power Rankings, you can find at PFF.com, the second hardest schedule in college
football. Now they pulled especially the big upset against Tennessee last year, right?
True.
Which really spurred them on the rest of the season. But it's just they need to get better in the secondary, and they're just playing some darn good teams here. Honestly, I mean, even a game like this year, Auburn's should be better than they were last year. We're going to get to them in a second, but I'm going to go under also. I think maybe a 5-7 sounds right to me, but pull an upset or two, they can get back to where they were last year.
Yeah, listen, I think Arkansas will probably be in a lot of shootouts next year, considering they have, like I said before, a top 5 quarterback in the conference. But also that defense has a lot of issues in the pass defense category with their secondary and their pass rush too. So Arkansas could be in a lot of shootouts next year, and just how hard that schedule was, I think they're going to go under 5.5. I think they're not going to make a bowl game like they did last year, and I think a 5-7 or even maybe a 4-8 year is unfortunately possible for the Razorbacks next year. So listen, Arkansas, it was a great year last year, a pretty good year, bounce back year. I think they're going to go back to missing a bowl game next year. One team, Dawn, that's missed a bowl game, I believe in 4 straight years now, has been the Auburn Tigers, who went 5-7 last year. Hugh Freeze, the Auburn head coach, you see right there, he's now 11-14 during 2 years as Auburn's head coach. That is actually an identical record to the one that Brian Harsin had in his 2 years as Auburn's head coach before he was fired and Hugh Freeze was hired to replace him. Auburn has now had 4 consecutive losing seasons. The first time that's happened since 1947 to 1950. It has been a brutal 4 years for the Auburn Tigers, considering how good they usually are in the SEC. So all of that sounds incredibly bleak on the surface. There's still some high expectations for Auburn going into next year. That's because they did an outstanding job in the transfer portal. They've signed a top 10 recruiting class in each of the last 2 years as well. Not only should Auburn have a winning season, the first one since 2020, this might also be a dark horse playoff contender, Dalton, due to their high ceiling. What is the biggest strength of the Auburn Tigers going into next year?
Well, the story is obviously going to be the quarterback Jackson Arnold and how much he can improve. But I'll tell you what, his problem at Oklahoma, we think, was a poor supporting cast. That's what we saw last year. No shortage of supporting cast here. This is a terrific offensive line led by their center, Connor Lew, and their left tackle, Xavier Chaplin. And they've got weapons on the outside, guys like Cam Coleman and Eric Singleton for him to throw to that are on paper better than anything Oklahoma had last year. So Jackson Arnold, this supporting cast, look, we're going to see if he's actually that good, if he can live up to that, 5-star, high 4-star billing that he had at Oklahoma. But he certainly has the tools to work with. And Auburn, I think, is picturing having a much more explosive offense, especially with Coleman and Singleton now and all that speed they have out there at receiver.
Yeah, they have the number 2 receiving core in the country, the only school that had 2 of my top 10 receivers in the country, and also my number 7 offensive line in the country, too. So, yeah, supporting cast is definitely the strength for Jackson Arnold and that Auburn team going into next year. We can answer our biggest question. Was that the problem for Jackson Arnold? That was really the question mark right now, because mentioned before, Jackson Arnold is a 5-star recruit coming out of high school, goes to Oklahoma, had only a 57.7 passing grade last year at Oklahoma, and he got benched for a few games at Oklahoma too for a true freshman. However, it is important to point out just how horrendous that supporting cast was in Oklahoma last year. Oklahoma had the worst receiving grade in the Power 4 with a 54.1 receiving grade, and they were tied for 103rd in offensive line grade too. So it's entirely possible with one of the best receiving corps in the country, 2 stud receivers, and a top 10 offensive line in the country, that Jackson Arnold can really improve and be a guy who looked like a 5-star recruit coming out of high school. But it's also possible that Jackson Arnold just isn't going to live up to the hype he had coming out of high school, and he's just not a 5-star quarterback like we thought he was coming out of high school, and be a recruiting bust, honestly, too. So that's kind of the biggest question mark right now is, okay, was it Oklahoma that made Jackson Arnold that bad last year? Because we've seen time and time again, Dolan, supporting cast for quarterbacks really makes or breaks them in college football and the NFL. The question is, did it break Jackson Arnold last year, and can it make him this year? Or is Jackson Arnold just not as good as we thought he could be?
You know, quarterbacks are always under the microscope, right? We're going to talk about Arch Manning and Nussmeier and Sellers and some of the big names, but I don't think there's a whole lot of guys under a bigger microscope than Arnold, right?
Yeah.
Because I really think he's the guy that's going to make or break Auburn's season here. And when you look at last year and struggling under that supporting cast, it was tough. In the 6 games he played against SEC opponents, he had a 42.6 passing grade.
No.
So it was hard for that offense to function. It was hard for him to function in it, right? So now you get to a Hugh Freeze offense where maybe you start to work to his strengths. And one of the things we saw last year that I think kind of surprised us both is he was one of the better rushers in the country. You saw, in Oklahoma's upset against Alabama, they ran the ball all over Alabama, right? And Arnold was a big part of that. 653 rushing yards and 24 explosive runs, top 25 marks in the country. And it's not like he played every game either. He was benched for a couple of games there. So he ran the ball well. He threw the ball in the intermediate range well when he could, when he had time in the pocket to work with. 7 of his 12 touchdowns and no interceptions in the intermediate range. But can he handle pressure? Can he handle SEC pressure? Can he handle it maybe less often behind a good offensive line? He took the 6th most sacks in the country last year, right? And he wasn't great under pressure. And I don't blame him. His confidence probably was shaken playing behind that offensive line, and they had so many injuries and everything up front at Oklahoma that you go, okay, now we're giving you the tools to work with. Can you handle the pressure of it, both of the situation and the environment in Auburn in a high-pressure situation and just under SEC defensive lines, right? The pressure is coming. Can you stand in the pocket and make those throws? If he can do that, there's a really high ceiling here, but he's honestly one of the biggest X factors in the entire SEC race.
He took the 6th most sacks in the country last year. That's a counting stat. He also didn't play for a few of the games, too, when Michael Hawkins was starting a quarterback. So he could have had the most sacks taken in the country, too, if he played the entire season for Oklahoma. So, yeah, pressure is on for Jackson Arnold going into next year. But a guy who should help him out a lot is in that receiving core, and Eric Singleton Jr. transferring in from Georgia Tech, the best wide receiver who transferred this offseason, in our opinion. 2 great years at Georgia Tech, 1,468 receiving yards over his 2 years with the Yellow Jackets, second most among all returning Power 4 wideouts. He also scored above the 99th percentile in PFF's game athleticism score metric, which measures just your size, your speed, your agility. So he's a blazer out there. He has track speed with the ability to hit a home run at any point, 664 receiving yards on 20-plus yard throws, on deep throws over the last 2 years are the most among all returning Power 4 receivers. So Eric Singleton Jr. alongside Cam Coleman, too, which might be the best receiving duo in the country. Those two are going to help out Jackson Arnold, I think, a lot on the outside next year. 2
of your top 10, right? The only team with 2 wide receivers in the top 10, right? I mean, just the look. I think when you look at this Auburn offense, they want to run the ball. Hugh Freeze always wants to run the football anywhere he is. They want to throw it deep downfield. Yeah. They've got Singleton. You don't get an Eric Singleton in the portal unless you want to chuck home run balls down the field.
Cam Coleman, too, can get downfield.
And Cam Coleman, we know what he can do already. Yeah. All the true freshman receivers. 2027 is going to be a whole lot of fun. But, no, you've got that set of receivers with those two especially. You're trying to get downfield. But it's fun on the defensive side, too, with their pass defense. And a guy we're going to hear about a lot for the next year is their edge defender, Keldrick Faulk. And, look, I was watching Faulk's tape recently again. You get a little Jason Pierre-Paul feel.
Yeah.
He's 6'6", he's 270. There's a lot of length. He's got very long arms. He can reduce down and play, on the inside shade or head up over the tackle. He's an awesome run defender. 23 run defense stops last year. Also 45 pressures and 9 sacks. He can do a little bit of everything. I think there's a little more to go when it comes to his pass rush technique, but Keldrick Faulk has the chance to be one of the elite edge rushers in college football this season. They lost Jalen McLeod on the other side of him off the edge, but Faulk has got elite tools, and he's got the ability to play in both dimensions. He's not just a designated pass rusher. That was the feeling I got. Just in my head, the name Jason Pierre-Paul came up, and he was a top 15 pick in the draft himself back in the day out of USF. I think Faulk's got similar traits, and he may be the biggest key to this defense really wrecking games up front.
He could absolutely be a top 15 pick in the NFL draft in 2026, too. He is a freaky player who could play as an edge rusher and even kick inside a little bit for Auburn, too. He's a really powerful defensive lineman. All right, Dalton, their win total is set at 7.5 by FanDuel, which means FanDuel and all the sportsbooks think Auburn's finally going to break that 4-year-long losing streak that they've had right now. Are you taking the over and saying, hey, they're going to be even better than that? Or are you saying, hey, listen, let's pump the brakes on Auburn a little bit. I know they got all this talent coming in, but this is still a team that's not had a winning season since 2020.
So there's a couple of things I like about this. And for several of these teams, I'm going to point out like an out-of-conference matchup here and there early in the season that's really going to tell us a lot. I think their Week 1 game at Baylor on the Friday of Week 1 is going to tell us a whole lot about both of those teams. We'll talk about Baylor in the Big 12 preview, but I think that's a huge game because you have two teams that are kind of on similar ground, right? They're talented. They want to compete at the top of their conferences. They haven't quite got there yet. There's some X factors in that, but I think that early game against Baylor on the road, Week 1, is going to tell us a lot about Auburn. But if you look at their SEC schedule, it's also not the most brutal out of all of these teams. There's some winnable games here, maybe some 50-50 games, depending on how you believe in Auburn's talent. If they get to the second half of their schedule, 4-2, maybe even 5-1, I think they've got a good runway the second half of the year. But I think I like the over 7.5 there. They need it. Let's be real. Hugh Freeze needs to be over that number, considering you mentioned it. They haven't made a bowl game in 4 years. But I think I'm going to take the over there. And that Week 1 game actually at Baylor out of conference fascinates me a lot.
I'm also taking the over for Auburn right now. I think 8-4, even 9-3 is certainly possible for the Auburn Tigers next year. Maybe even better than that. They really hit their ceiling and become a true college football playoff contender. I think at the very least, they have enough talent on offense and defense to at least have a winning record next year. If Jackson Arnold can live up to the high school 5-star hype he had, Auburn can be a college football playoff contender, in my opinion, too, which is saying a lot considering, like I said before, 4 straight losing seasons for the Tigers, which hasn't happened in like 75 years at that program. So I think it should be a big bounce back for Auburn next year, and it better be a big bounce back for Hugh Freeze and the Auburn Tigers next year. Dawn, one team that had kind of a bounce back year that nobody really saw coming was the Florida Gators, who won 8-5 last year, despite Billy Napier being on the hot seat, maybe the hottest seat in the country, and despite having one of the most brutal schedules in the country. He had his best year yet with Florida with an 8-5 record and their first bowl game victory since 2019. Expectations are probably around the same for Florida going into next year, thanks to a potential superstar right there at quarterback in sophomore DJ Lagway and a great supporting cast around him too. If he can polish up his footwork, they should be able to score on anyone. The biggest question mark, which we'll get into in just a second, is whether a now experienced secondary can improve after really struggling last year. But Dalton, this offense has a ton of potential.
Yeah, absolutely. With DJ Lagway as its quarterback, I think this was the hope last year in his true freshman season was that, okay, could he be the ray of light, right? Could he get us out of quarterback purgatory? I know Graham Mertz did a good job for him, but this thing really sparked in the second half when Lagway became the starter. Now, was it due to Mertz's injury? Sure. But you're talking about a guy he almost led an upset over Tennessee. He upset LSU and Ole Miss late in the year, right? Beat Florida State, won their bowl game. They got hot down the stretch, and it's because Lagway there's a reason he was the number one quarterback coming out of high school last year. He's the ray of hope, and
yes.
At least he's given them that ray of hope going into this season. Now, there are things on both sides of the ball, and even for Lagway himself that have to improve, but you have him, you have Trey Wilson coming back healthy, J. Michael Sturdivant transferring in from UCLA, Aiden Mizell, a really good offensive line, a potentially explosive offense. But if it really lives up to the hype, and Lagway lives up to the hype, one of the most explosive offenses in the SEC. We got to see it more consistently, but the talent is all there, especially on the offensive side of the ball, for this Florida team to play with anybody, because they proved they could the second half of last year.
You got a quarterback with maybe more potential than anyone else in the country in DJ Lagway, a top 10 receiver in Trey Wilson, a great running back in sophomore Jaden Ball, and also one of the 5 best offensive lines, in my opinion, too, in the entire nation. So, yeah, if Lagway can take the next step in his development, they should be able to score and light up the scoreboard on everyone. Now, the question is, will the score be lit up on them, too? Because the secondary did struggle a lot last year. Florida had just a 63.4 coverage grade last year, 111th in the country. Now, they did bring back 6 of the 8 defensive backs who played at least 250 snaps for the Gators last year. So we'll be hoping that those players will take a big step forward. I do like some of the players they have in that secondary, like Jordan Castell, the safety. But like I said before, as a unit, they really did not perform well at all last year. And that's going to be the biggest question mark for Florida going into next year. But Dalton, tell me more about DJ Lagway. Again, a guy who probably has more physical talent than anyone else in college football at quarterback. But there's still some things to clean up with them.
Absolutely, and I think you see it right there. The number that jumps out at you is that 95.6 deep passing grade. That was the 3rd best in the country last season. And what you have is arm talent. The ball absolutely explodes out of his hand. As a true freshman, honestly, already has NFL caliber arm talent, and he can make any throw on the field. I think that's what you're getting at. He's got good size. He can get outside the pocket and improvise a bit. He's not a Josh Allen type of athlete necessarily as a runner, but he can break tackles and escape the pocket and make throws on the move. I think what you have is this big split between being able to hit the home runs and needing to be more accurate underneath. And I think that's really where it's going to be the key for him, for Lagway this season and his success is, can he just be more accurate underneath and just settle his feet down, right? I think if he used this offseason to settle his feet down and throw from a more consistent base, because a lot of times, you said it, he's throwing off one foot, he's throwing off of both feet, he's making jump throws that somehow go 50 yards and are still absolute ropes, but it hurts your underneath accuracy when you don't have a consistent base. So honestly, it's going to sound funny because I know you're going to talk about another guy, but I think the most important guy for Lagway and for this offense is a healthy Trey Wilson, because he can take those underneath routes and he can make all those plays after the catch, and all Lagway has to do is get him the football underneath. But that's what I'm looking for, footwork and accuracy. If he fixes those two things underneath, the sky is the absolute limit, because his arm talent is off the charts.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you mentioned before, I mean, he was one of the 5 highest graded quarterbacks on deep throws last year, and one of the, 10 lowest graded, I believe, on all their throws and intermediate and short throws. So yeah, it was just really a guy who just takes big shots down the field and is a great deep ball thrower, but got to clean up the accuracy underneath for Lagway as well. One guy who doesn't really need to clean up anything, because he's already the best center in the country and maybe the best interior offensive lineman in the country, is Jake Slaughter, our number 1 interior offensive lineman going into next year. Stellar redshirt junior year. In fact, if you asked me last year, I would have told you Jake Slaughter deserved the Remington Award as the best center in college football. He was the only Power 4 center who had 80-plus grades as both a pass blocker and as a run blocker. And even more impressive was the schedule he faced. I mentioned before, Florida had one of the most brutal schedules in the country, maybe the most brutal schedule in terms of the talented defensive tackles Jake Slaughter had to face. He had to play Walter Nolan, Alfred Collins, Shamar Turner, Deion Walker, Omar Norman Lott, and Josh Farmer. All those players were selected in the first 4 rounds of the 2025 NFL Draft. 85.8 overall grade over the last 2 years. Only Jackson Powers Johnson has a higher grade among Power 4 centers. Moves very well at 6'4", 308 pounds. He dominates in his zone blocking scheme. And Dalton, I think he is the star player for Florida right now and a top 15 player in the country.
Absolutely agree. Jake Slaughter, it just you flip on his tape and play to play, it feels like he never makes any mistakes. And you mentioned the level of competition. He's already done it once. I would expect the same this year with a year of experience under his belt. Look, really a very good Florida offensive line all the way across, all 5 guys, right? And I think what we have faith in this Florida team and a stable environment for DJ Lagway is the fact that they have a great O-line, they have a great D-line, right? And we'll get to that in a second. They just have to fill in around it. And they can be really good. It's almost frustrating to watch at times because even you saw on both sides in the trenches, especially when they played LSU, dominated the trenches on both sides of the ball. And LSU had a lot of really talented players on both sides. So I think that's what gives you hope against some of the better teams in the SEC. And Florida's got another tough schedule this year. Is they're really good on the offensive and defensive lines.
They had my number 4 offensive line in the country, and I believe my number 4 D-line in the country too, Dalton. And you're going to get into a guy right here who mix up that.
And that's led by Tyreek Sapp, who had the 10th best grade of any edge defender in college football last year. 88.7 run defense grade, 82 pass rush grade. He can do a little bit of everything. A former defensive tackle who they use as such. They reduce him inside, much like I talked about with Keldrick Faulk at Auburn earlier. He can get over the tackle. He can play a wide 9. He can pretty much align wherever you need him to. He's an excellent run stopper first and foremost, and the pass rush is still coming along. He's 6'2", but he plays with good leverage. He's quick inside. He can give you a little bit of everything. So I think to have a versatile, strong player like Tyreek Sapp next to an awesome defensive tackle, really talented one, especially as a pass rusher, and Caleb Banks, you can see where Florida is building this team in the trenches and then behind it on offense around their quarterback. But I think especially for their defense, the hope is that this defensive line can dominate and then the secondary can get better behind it. It's kind of the same way. It reminds me a little bit of what we talked about with Miami last year, right? Where it's, you have this great D-line. I just need the back 7 to hold up enough. That's really the big question with Florida. But when you're starting your defensive line with Tyreek Sapp and then with Caleb Banks next to him, you got a lot of hope up front.
Absolutely. Yeah, 2 guys who maybe could be first-round picks in the NFL Draft. Tyreek Sapp had a 90.4 PFF grade last year, second best among returning Power 4 edge rushers. All right, Dalton. Florida, do we think they're going to have another 8+ win season? Right now, the win total set at 7.5 by FanDuel. I will say Florida has the 4th hardest schedule in the country. Another brutal schedule for the Gators, once again, according to our power rankings. Are they going to go over or under? And what do you think is ultimately the bottom line for Florida?
This is tough. That's another hard one because I see 5. I think I see 5 games here that I think they should win. You never know with the rivalry in the Florida State game and how much they need to get a lot better too. But I see 5 games here that I think they should win. Can they scratch out 3 others? Maybe Miami. We don't know what LSU is right now, especially on defense with all the transfers. I'll say I'll take the over. Not too far. I think 8 or 9 could be within range. But this is another really tough schedule. LSU, Miami, Texas, A&M, Georgia. I mean, there's some tough games here. They beat LSU and Ole Miss last year. So I'll take the over. I could see this getting in the 8-9 range, but a lot of it depends on, you've mentioned it before, DJ Lagway getting more consistent and the secondary just holding things together. If the secondary can't hold things together again, they're going to have a real problem with all the great offenses and quarterbacks they're playing. But I'll take the over. I could see 8 or 9 being the result here. Maybe a borderline playoff team.
All right, I'm actually going to take the unders. First one we disagree on today. I just look at the schedule, man. They're at LSU. They are at Miami. They host Texas, but still has a top 3 or so team in the country. At Texas A&M. You got Georgia too, and then you're at Ole Miss. You still play Tennessee. You still have Florida State. I think, again, I'm not saying it's a hard under. I think a 7-5 is probably what I would say for Florida right now.
That 7.5 feels right, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
It's like,
that's exactly what I would put it.
I want to say 8-4. You want to say 7-5.
Talent-wise, they're better than 7-5, but this schedule is just brutal.
Well, the schedule is brutal, but they do have things that they need to get better with. If they can't, if for the 3rd year in a row they can't cover, they're going to go under. Because, I mean, look at this. They're playing Garrett Nussmeier, Carson Beck, Arch Manning. I know A&M's a running team, but they can still mix it up a little bit. Georgia always finds a way, and that's a rivalry, right?
Lane Kiffin
and Austin Simmons, which we'll get there, but I'm a believer in their offense. So, I mean, if you can't cover, things get a lot more difficult. We've seen that at LSU. We've seen it at Miami. It's a problem if your secondary is not right. If that gets right, and again, Lagway just takes a natural step, I think the over is right in front of him. That feels like the right number, though. That's 7.5. That's one of the tougher ones I think we have today.
It's all on Lagway and all on that secondary. If they both improve, yeah, Florida could be a dark horse playoff contender, absolutely, in 2025. Next up, though, a team that is no stranger to the college football playoff. That is the Georgia Bulldogs, who had a chance to win their third national title in 4 years last year, but that really ended when Carson Beck suffered a season-ending elbow injury in the SEC title game against Texas. Now, of course, Georgia would go on to win that game, but their backup quarterback in Gunnar Stockton was not really up to the task in the college football playoff, only a 56.5 PFF grade in that quarterfinal loss to Notre Dame. But now Gunnar Stockton is the starting quarterback, so Georgia's hoping with a full offseason as the starter, he can improve and be the star quarterback that Georgia think he can be after being a top 10 quarterback coming out of high school. Carson Beck, of course, is now at Miami. We'll talk about them in the ACC preview coming out later. Bulldogs also had a really underperforming receiving core last year, but they did improve it in the transfer portal, adding a couple guys there like Zachariah Branch too. There are still some questions on the offensive line, though, with all three interior starters, who all three are great players too. All three of them are gone now to the NFL. The defense does lose some stars, Dawn, like 3 first-round picks in Mykel Williams and Jalen Walker and Malachi Starks, but Kirby Smart has always had elite defenses that should be the same next year.
I mean, if you're asking me their biggest strength, really, it's Kirby Smart. Yeah. I mean, honestly, even as far as they got last year.
Best coach in the country, yeah.
Yeah, even as far as they got last year with the struggles in the passing game and then eventually Carson Beck's injury. And look, even competing really hard against Notre Dame in that playoff game, right? It was a tough defensive game, and they just kind of got ground away eventually with Notre Dame playing a better tough defensive game. But you look at what they have on defense. They always have great players. They've got Kirby Smart. Then you look on the field, Kristen Miller at defensive tackle, C.J. Allen at linebacker, K.J. Bolton's going to be a superstar at safety, Dalen Everett and a loaded group of corners. They're always really good on defense. It's almost like you want to say, look, they lost, what did we say, their top 6 defensive linemen in snaps played last year, something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
Plus Jalen Walker. I mean, they lose all these players, but they have Kirby and they have a boatload of talent coming in. They're always going to be great on defense, and that's really the floor of where you're at with Georgia's. Why are they going to win at the bare minimum 8 or 9 games? Because they're going to have a top 10 defense.
Absolutely, yeah. Georgia is one of 4 schools in America that has a top 10 D-line, linebacker unit, and secondary. So yes, even with losing 3 first-round picks on the defense, they should still have a really good defense next year. So defense with plenty of talent is the biggest strength. A passing game with plenty of questions is the weakness right now for Georgia. A brand new quarterback, like I mentioned before, and Gunnar Stockton, we'll talk about in just a second. 57.8 passing grade on 104 career dropbacks so far. And not really helping him is the fact that, like I said before, the entirety of that elite interior offensive line is now gone from that team. And I mentioned before, Georgia did improve the receiving core in the transfer portal, but they're banking on Noah Thomas and Zachariah Branch to really become superstars for them to help out Gunnar Stockton as he transitions to the starting quarterback for Georgia. But Dawn, what did you see from Gunnar Stockton in his start against Notre Dame and overall in just all the snaps we saw from him in his career?
Well, look, he's got a good arm. I'll give him that much. We saw, especially there was one big-time throw in the playoff game against Notre Dame where you're like, okay, that guy's got some high velo, right? He's got a good arm. He loads into it. It's a little bit of a longer release. But I think what you have is a guy who, more like in the past, and we've seen them do it with Stetson Bennett, we've seen him do it with Carson Beck, a guy who's been in the system, a guy at certain points you could tell has been in the system. Look, last year went 20 of 24 on play action passes with an 83.5 passing grade. I think it's still going to be the same dynamic with Georgia's has always been. They're going to want to run the football. They're going to want to get Stockton moving in the bootleg game and play action, and then give him throws that he's comfortable with. Now, the question is going to be, can he handle the pressure of it all? He's got one career start, and that came against Notre Dame. Couldn't quite handle it there. Got a long delivery, takes him a while, needs to be a little more aware of pressure, and he's definitely not an elite athlete. So there's some things that are there to work with for sure. There's also some things that are missing that were the reasons he wasn't necessarily a 5-star guy, right? He's a kid from right down the road there in Georgia. He's playing for the hometown team. He got the one playoff start last year, but I think it's just about the lack of experience, the lack of consistency from what we saw last year, and a lack of touch, because he's got this almost, I don't want to say a pitcher's delivery, but it's a longer delivery that's meant to generate velocity. He doesn't throw with a lot of touch, so he's really got to be a bit more precise with the accuracy on his throws this year.
You definitely, and I think Georgia, with all the question marks in their passing game, they're going to rely on the run game a lot next year. And a guy they rely on a lot is Nate Frazier, their top running back. He was the number 2 running back coming out of high school in the 2024 high school class. Had a really strong true freshman year at Georgia. He led the Bulldogs with 671 rushing yards and had an 84.2 rushing grade as a true freshman, which was 8th among all players in the SEC. So I really think now that Trevor Etienne is gone to the NFL, I think Nate Frazier could have a really, really good year as a sophomore. Like I said before, had a lot of potential out of high school, and he showed why in his true freshman year.
I absolutely agree. I thought especially he came in right away in week 1 last year and played a great game against Clemson. He doesn't have blazing 4.3 speed necessarily, but his vision is terrific, and he gets north and south quick. I think he's going to be a core piece of this offense, especially, again, when you talk about a team, I think early in the year especially, trying to protect its quarterback. Nate Frazier is going to play a huge part in this offense on the ground.
Definitely. But Dawn, another guy who's a true sophomore who we're even higher on, who we think, yes, they lost a superstar safety in Malachi Starks, but they got another one in KJ Bolden.
I think this Georgia team this year is built through their secondary. Last year it was a 3-layer defense, and their D-line was spectacular in run defense, but we got to talk about the true sophomore KJ Bolden at safety. I mean, you talk about you're losing Malachi Starks, and it feels like it doesn't even matter because you've got such a similar player in Bolden as a true freshman, a great tackler, a really good run defender. He was where he needed to be in coverage at all times. I really think he's a very similar player to Malachi Starks and another 2027 draftee that we're going to be talking about as a potential first-round pick, but he becomes the centerpiece now of this defense, right? You've got a really good group of corners. You're losing Starks, but I think Bolden this year is the glue that holds it together on the back end, so he's going to be a lot of fun to watch. An 82 PFF grade as a true freshman is outstanding in the SEC. We've seen this lately. Malachi Starks, even Caleb Downs when he was at Alabama. Freshman safeties coming in better than ever, and KJ Bolden's another one.
Yeah, 13 coverage stops, tied for 5th among all safeties in the nation as a true freshman last year. It's so crazy comparing him to Malachi Starks on because both of them were the number 1 safety coming out of high school, and you saw why immediately in their true freshman years. Malachi Starks had a great freshman year at Georgia. They won the national title that year. KJ Bolden had a great freshman year at Georgia as well. I think he could be a first-round pick in the 2027 draft when that comes around very soon. So he's been fantastic. Bottom line time now, Dawn. Will Georgia make the college football playoff, and will they go above their win total, which is set at 9.5 by FanDuel right now? Or with a brand new quarterback in Gunnar Stockton, will they kind of disappoint next year?
I've been in between on this. And then I kind of keep going back to it's still Kirby Smart. And I feel like my first instinct tells me they might get back to the same spot they were in last year. The quarters. Yeah, they were in the quarters last year. They might get to the same spot as last year, or maybe even bow out in the first round, because I am worried about this passing game. And the receivers are what they are, and if they can get Noah Thomas and Zachariah Branch and a good group of tight ends too, right? You still have Oscar Delp, you still have Lawson Lucky, right? So I think you have a lot of talent on the outside. It's the offensive line, it's the quarterback. And when you have those two things as your big questions, I want to say no. I look at their schedule, and I think there's only 2 games against Alabama and Texas where I don't think Georgia's a pretty clean favorite. I'm going to take the over. I'm going to say right now, if I had to make a prediction right this minute, I'm going to tell you 10-2 and in the playoff. But I'm not. I actually don't think right now I could say they're the best team in the SEC with their quarterback and their offensive line situation. I'm a little worried about that, but I'm going to take a soft over at 10-2.
Yeah,
I'm with you. I almost did it, but I just
they do host the 2 hardest games. They are hosting Alabama and hosting Texas.
They're hosting both, and then you have at Tennessee. We'll get to at Auburn. The Gator game is always fun, but Lagway has to prove he could. Well, Lagway almost beat him last year if he didn't get hurt. I mean, that might have been a thing too. But there's some tough games, but there's also 6 or 7 here that I go, yeah, they're not losing. Kirby just won't let them lose those games. So then you start narrowing it down. It's still Kirby. It's still Georgia. Yeah. And I don't right this minute think I'm going to pick them to win the conference, but I think 10 wins is usually a safe bet with them.
Okay.
They find a way to do it, basically.
Yeah, I'm actually going to go under. I'm worried about that offense next year. Listen, I think Carson Beck, going from him to Gunnar Stockton, could be a pretty big downgrade, in my opinion. I'm still a big Carson Beck guy. I'm going to go the soft under. I absolutely consider them going 10-2, considering how often they do win 10 games under Kirby Smart. But you got Bama, you got Texas, you got Florida, you got Auburn, you got Ole Miss in that schedule too. Tennessee too. It's tough. I'm gonna go under just because I am very worried about the passing game.
There's a very real scenario for both.
And the offensive line, I'm a little worried about too.
I would be worried about it because the tackles were already struggling last year.
Yeah, and now the entire interior offensive line's gone.
And they were all really good.
Yeah.
I get it. Like there is a scenario for both, and I say the same thing on the NFL show. If either of your questions are O-line or quarterback,
yeah,
you have an issue. And they may have two issues. The difference is they have Kirby, they have the defense. They're going to be in every game. They're going to find a way to win games their way with, Nate Frazier in the running game and still finding a way. But it's going to be tough this year. It's going to be tough. And I think the big thing, we're just going to have to see early in the season if Stockton can survive, if the offensive line can survive in its own right, and then if Stockton can survive behind it. There's a lot of questions, I think, this year with Georgia on offense.
And to give Stockton credit, I will say, yes, I wasn't impressed by what I saw from him, but he was put in a really impossible situation. Your first career start is against Notre Dame in the college football playoff quarterfinal. Within full offseason as a starter, he could be a lot better.
And the second half of the Texas game. We're judging Stockton on a small sample against the two best secondaries in the country.
Yes, yeah.
That is tough.
That is fair.
I think to give him a chance, especially early in the season, to get his footing. But you mentioned it. It's the offensive line, too. It's not just – if I had a top 5 offensive line, I'd go – and you're hoping
Zachariah Branch is who we thought he could be coming out of high school.
Exactly. So there's a lot of variable, but their defense and Kirby Smart is the constant.
Yes, right.
I'll take kind of the softer 10-2 approach to that one. I'll take the over.
I'll take the soft under on that approach, too. So I'm going under for Georgia. I think probably 9-3 is probably what I'll say for them next year. Next up is a team that also had a really tough 2024. Georgia didn't have a tough last year, but they could have a tough 2025. Kentucky had a rough one in 2024. That's who we're talking about next. They did have an upset over 6th-ranked Ole Miss. It was their highlight of the season, but it was really a year to forget for Kentucky. Only a 4-8 record last year, snapping a 3-year streak with at least a winning record, and it was their worst record in the last 11 years. Brock Vandagriff, formerly from Georgia, did not live up to the hype he had coming out of high school as a 5-star recruit. Only had the 100th best passing grade in the country at 66.7, and Kentucky was only 110th in EPA per pass. Now, the Wildcats did really improve that offensive line, but there are still serious concerns with their passing game as they welcome in yet another transfer at quarterback in Zach Calzada, who we'll talk about in just a second. Defense did lose some key pieces, but it should be at least an average unit once again in 2025. But Don, I mentioned before, that offensive line, which really struggled in 2024, they did a really good job of addressing in the portal.
Yeah, they did, and it should be better this year. Jagger Burton obviously was hurt last year, played less than 400 snaps. You got, your number 11 interior offensive lineman in the country, and Josh Braun from Arkansas. So you're talking about a few new transfers in there, 2 returning starters to go with it, and you at least have the foundation, because we know with Kentucky, look, they want to run the football first and foremost. They're a physical team. Mark Stoops prides himself on being the more physical team. So if you can start that with an improved offensive line from what they had last year that was a bottom 30 unit, then you start to build everything around Calzada coming up from Incarnate Word and try to figure out things in the run game and outside with those weapons. But the offensive line is so often the key to your offense, and at least Kentucky has that working for them. Hopefully with 3 new transfers and better health up front.
Absolutely. Yeah, they were 111th in offensive line grade last year. They should be a lot better with all the transfers they brought in this year. Problem is, though, it doesn't matter if you have a great offensive line, if you just can't do anything in the passing game. Really, the question mark for Kentucky is, will they have any semblance of a passing game next year? Their new quarterback is Zach Calzada, we'll talk about in just a second, only a 71.5 passing grade last year at Incarnate Word, which is an FCS school. The Wildcats also lost their 2 star receivers to the transfer portal in Dane Key and Barryon Brown. So your top 2 receivers, who are both really good players, are gone. And now you have a brand new quarterback in Zach Calzada, who Dalton kind of had some issues at the FCS level last year.
So it's up and down. So when you watch his tape, he goes down to Incarnate Word, and it reminds you a little bit of back in the days of Cam Ward and Incarnate Word, and they just like their gunslingers down there. So essentially he went down there and he said, hey, let me just lay it on the line and see what happens. So he was in the top 7 in the FCS last year in yards, touchdowns, and big-time throws. But there was some turnover-worthy plays that came along with that. He's just taking his chances with a lot of deep shots in tight windows down the field. Some of them work, some don't. In the end, it was a good season for him because it got him back into the SEC. And we remember that big upset. Was it 2021? He had the big upset over number 1 Alabama for Texas A&M. So I don't think he'll be rattled by SEC environments, but what he does have is a really good arm that he likes to take a lot of deep shots with, right? 14 deep touchdowns last year, over 20 air yards, second most in the FCS. So you can do that at that level. It's just, can you do it at the SEC level where the defenses are a lot better? And with a receiving core that lost their top 2 receivers, Dane Key and Barryon Brown, to the transfer portal, right? So maybe those deep shots won't be as accessible. If he can get to them, then great. The question then is, what else is he able to give you? Because last year at the FCS level at Incarnate Word, he was able to improvise. But they say around here that at the 2.5-second mark and beyond, quarterback play gets unstable. That's the thing for Calzada, is once he started to improvise last year, 22 big-time throws beyond 2.5 seconds, but also 11 turnover-worthy plays. So when I tell you he went down there and he said, kind of like Kyle McCord did for you at Syracuse last year, he went down there and said, you know what, I'm going to let it rip.
Yeah.
And he let it rip, and the grade is what it is because it was very high variance. It could be one play, could be spectacular, 60-yard bomb. The next one is, what the hell are you doing? That's what you got from Calzada and Incarnate Word. It turned out to work for him, but that style of play on the SEC doesn't always play, so he's going to have to be a little cleaner with the football and take maybe a few less chances against the schedule that Kentucky's going to face.
And to be fair to him, yes, the grade this past year wasn't great. The year before at Incarnate Word, 87.8 passing grade. And actually 2 years earlier at A&M in 2021, he had an 80.8 grade at A&M that year.
He's talented. He's got a really good arm. He's like 60. He can get up to about 60 yards in pads with his range. He's got a really good arm. You just have to reel in the ball security.
Yes.
That's what it is. If you can, I know that's the hardest thing to do is throw the ball downfield and be safe with the football. But if you can reel that part in, especially in the SEC where you just cannot turn the football over, it'll kill you. Then you talk about having success with him as your quarterback. So he could start for them. He could have a good season. That's what I'm looking at is, can you control the home run ball a little bit more? Can you throw it underneath just a little bit better and just kind of keep us with the chains, and then we can find your home run shots?
Well, one guy you should help them out a lot, too, is their new offensive guard in Joshua Braun, transferring in from Arkansas, in my opinion, a top 10 guard in college football right now. He played at Florida and at Arkansas, now plays for his 3rd SEC school in his 6th season of college football. He was excellent as a pass blocker for Arkansas last year, 10th among all guards in the Power 4 with an 85.9 pass blocking grade. And his 71.5 run blocking grade was also a top 25 mark in the Power 4. And according to our wins above average metric, he was one of the 20 most valuable guards in the nation. So really, Joshua Braun, a great player, is the star offensive player, I think, now for Kentucky. And like I said before, was a fantastic addition by Mark Stoops in the transfer portal.
Yeah, no, I agree. Look, you can't have the 111th ranked offensive line in the country if you're playing in the SEC.
No.
You just can't do it. I mean, I know even we're going to talk about another team later that had one even lower than that and found a way to make a bowl game, but you won't do much more. So he did the right thing going and fixing the offensive line. They lost a couple weapons. They brought in a couple different ones in, say, Kendrick Law, right, or a J.J. Hester.
Yep.
They have Jamori Macklin. I think what you're talking about here is setting up Calzada to succeed. They've done it, especially on the offensive line. They've done a nice job of that.
Absolutely. So, Dawn, a guy who's going to go up against a lot in practice is a guy we're going to spotlight here on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, defensive tackle David Gusta, another transfer from Washington State. Going back and watching his tape again was fun. He's twitchy, isn't he?
Yeah,
He's got this 290 pounds. He's a little bit on the smaller side, but he's twitchy. I really like his first step. I believe he only had one sack last year that he had, but he created a lot of pressure. He's just a guy who just shoots gaps. He's strong. He plays with a wide base. He can even take on double teams with the leverage that he has, and he plays with his feet a little bit wide to keep that base about him. So I think this is somebody, look, Kentucky's had a lot of good defensive linemen going to the NFL lately. Gusta could be another one. A really good year last year at Washington State. If he can bring that up to the SEC level, then you're talking about, I think, another NFL prospect, but he's got that fun, penetrating, fast twitch kind of 3 technique thing about him. I really liked watching him both in the run and the pass game.
Yeah, not as massive as Deion Deion Walker was, who's now playing for the Buffalo Bills.
A little bit different, yeah.
Yeah, but he's a great player, man. He had the 11th best grade among all D tackles in the country last year with an 84.4 grade, 84.8 pass rush grade. It was tied for 6th among all D tackles in the country. I'm with you, Dalton. When I was watching him, David Gustis flashed on tape for Washington State. I'm excited to see what he could do at Kentucky next year. All right, bottom line time now for the Wildcats. Their win total is 4.5 right now. So even after a 3-year streak of winning seasons, the sports books right now, Dolan, are pretty low on Kentucky after a 4-8 record last year. What do you think is the bottom line here, and are you taking the over or under for that 4.5 win total?
I think I'm taking the under.
Yeah.
The loss of Barryon Brown and Dane Key at receiver, and I know again they have Jamori Macklin, they got Kendrick Law in from Alabama, which helps with the speed and the deep threat with Calzada. But Calzada coming back up from the FCS. Kentucky's playing a brutal schedule. They were already struggling last year, winning only 4 games last year. I know that maybe the quarterback situation's more stable, gives them a chance to do more than that. They're always a physical team that brings it in the trenches, but I'm worried about the receiving core and the lack of depth and weaponry out there. And then, it's a brutal schedule. It's one of the hardest SEC schedules. Plus, they have to go to Louisville out of conference. I mean, it's just, even a team like Toledo, who beat Mississippi State last year, that's not an easy out of conference. That's one of the harder G5 games you're going to get. So I'm going to take under the 4.5. They won 4 games last year. I think it's just going to be tough because almost every SEC game here looks like it would have to be an upset for them to win.
I agree with that. I'm taking the under as well. I think Zach Calzada performs like he did last year, Kentucky will probably fail to make a bowl game. If we see a 2023 Zach Calzada or a 2021 Zach Calzada, if he performs at that level, Kentucky can surprise a lot of people and make a bowl game next year and kind of cool off that hot seat talk from Mark Stoops. But I look at that schedule right now. It's the 6th hardest in the country according to our power rankings. One of their out-of-conference games is Louisville. All the SEC games are brutal for them, too. They really don't have much of they don't really play any other SEC teams that are even close to their level, like maybe a Mississippi State or something like that. They play a lot of really good SEC teams. I think it could be like a 3-9 type of year for Kentucky, unfortunately. And I think pretty well under that 4.5 win total right now, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's just tough because yes, they got better on the O-line, but they went 4-8 last year, and I don't know this is anywhere I can look at them and go, they got significantly better from that 4-8 team, right? Obviously, we said the same thing about Arkansas last year, and then Talon Green was a way better quarterback than they had the previous year. So you never know, especially when you're changing at quarterback. But right now, I do think it's going to be another tough season in Lexington.
At least 2 upsets are probably required to go above 4.5, which I don't know if I'm predicting that for Kentucky right now. So unfortunately for the Wildcats, probably go under this year. We'll see what happens with Mark Stoops after that, if he does have another 3-9, 4-8 type of year. But that's what we got for the Kentucky Wildcats. Next up, another school's kind of disappointed lately. That is the LSU Tigers. LSU was under 10 wins last year and outside of the top 25 in the final AP poll for the first time in Brian Kelly's era, really, at LSU's 3 years at LSU. The defense, once again, plagued the Tigers. They were 82nd in the country in EPA per play last year. They're hoping that numerous incoming transfers can help fix that side of the ball. But even if they can't, LSU's offense should be able to keep them in a lot of shootouts because they have a potential top 10 pick at quarterback in Garrett Nussmeier and plenty of playmakers for him to work with too. Now the issue could be for that offense, they lost 4 of 5 starters from that elite offensive line, including a top 5 pick at left tackle in Will Campbell too. But Dawn, really the biggest strength of the team, like I mentioned before, Garrett Nussmeier and some really good weapons at both wide receiver, tight end, and running back.
It's exactly what you think about with the Tigers, right? It's Garrett Nussmeier, a top 5 quarterback, and a bunch of guys for him to throw to. He was top 10 in big-time throws last year, and then you look at what they brought in. You have Barryon Brown, you have Aaron Anderson, you have Nick Anderson, you have Chris Hilton, you have Trey'Dez Green at tight end, you have Caden Durham in the backfield. They have all the offensive firepower necessary, and look, the last 2 years, that's been the case, right? They had Jaden Daniels and Malik Neighbors, and that explosive offense missed the playoff. Last year, you had Garrett Nussmeier and all the receivers that he had, and it's still, they just need to be supported better, right? And I think what gives you hope is an elite quarterback and an elite set of weapons, and they just have to fill in around it. But that's the entire idea, is people going, okay, LSU's a playoff team this year, Garrett Nussmeier is a Heisman contender. Is that all going to come to fruition? A lot of that, sometimes we know that Heisman is a bit of a team award here and there, and they have to figure out some things. But it's a great group of skill players for sure that they're working with.
But I feel like we said this time and time again for LSU. Yeah, great quarterback with Jaden Daniels, Garrett Nussmeier. Great weapons, Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas Jr., all the guys they have at LSU right now too. And they've had the second best offense in EPA per play over the last 2 years. So you'd imagine second best offense, they should make the playoff easily with that. They haven't, because over the last 2 years, LSU has the 9th worst defense in the Power 4 in EPA per play. Now, they did add some transfers that are notable, like A.J. Halsey, the safety coming in from Houston, Mansour Delane, the cornerback from Virginia Tech, which some people think could be a first-round pick in next year's draft, Patrick Payton, the former highly touted edge rusher from Florida State, too. They're hoping those guys, alongside a great linebacker unit, can help turn around that side of the ball. But if they don't, LSU could be in a ton of shootouts once again, and when there's a lot of shootouts like that, it's kind of a 50-50 toss-up for you. They really need the defense to really perform a lot better next year.
And I think it all goes together, right? The lack of a consistent run game, the lack of consistent defense. Garrett Nussmeier took the second most dropbacks last year in the country behind Kyle McCord. I think for as good as he is, you kind of want that to come down a little bit. Let's make some stops. Let's control this game a little bit better. And really, those defensive transfers, we'll talk about the O-line too, but those defensive transfers, that's going to be the key to their whole season. Plus, Harold Perkins coming back healthy and doing what we know he can do, whether it's rushing the passer and coverage at linebacker, doing anything he can do to help that pass defense, because that's really, to me, what it comes down to is pass defense, right? You can get in shootouts all you want, but if you still can't make stops, eventually it's not going to matter, right? You'll win some and lose some. That's just high-variance football. So I think you hit it right on the head. It's just they have to be better, especially in the secondary. Those transfer guys are really the key to the season.
Absolutely. So let's talk about a guy who could be keeping LSU in shootouts next year. A guy, Dalton, who a lot of people think might be the best quarterback in the country, maybe the best quarterback in the NFL draft next year. Tell me more about Garrett Nussmeier.
Yeah, so, I mean, look, you're talking about a guy who, when we did this exact preview last year, actually I shouldn't say last year, but when I was studying Garrett Nussmeier last year, gunslinger. You could see it even in a small sample, right? Gunslinger. Now we're getting it again. It's just going to be, he's got a 5.6% career big-time throw rate. He's going to sling it downfield. He's going to throw it into tight windows. He's going to challenge the defense no matter what the coverage is, and you get some spectacular throws out of it, no question. He's got an NFL-caliber arm. He can make NFL-caliber throws. He throws the ball generally on time. You saw the pretty quick average time to throw right there. It's just a matter of, can they help him out? And sometimes that gunslinger mentality can get him, right? Because you're talking about, okay, he had the 6th most pass attempts last year into tight windows, only completed 19 of those. Like, he's going to try it, right? He's just going to try any throw on the field. I think that's what you look at is you go, okay, he's going to sling it into tight windows. How often do we want him doing that, or can we create more easy throws? And he doesn't really have much to improvise with. He started to move outside the pocket a little bit more last year, but certainly not going to take off and run on you like Jaden Daniels used to at LSU, right? So a guy who wins from the pocket. He is cerebral. He's the son of an NFL offensive coordinator, Doug Nussmeier, who's right down the road with the Saints, and he's a gunslinger from the pocket, kind of an old-school gunslinger, but very, very good. Look, it works more often than it doesn't. Again, I just think they need to support him better, and the one thing I do question is losing those 4 NFL-caliber starters on the offensive line.
Yeah, absolutely. They did add a lot of really good weapons in the portal, too. I mentioned before, Barryon Brown from Kentucky. He went to LSU. So they have him. They have Aaron Anderson there, too. Trey'Dez Green, who I think could be a breakout star at tight end. A lot of weapons for Garrett Nussmeier to work with. But I want to talk about a guy who's going to hand the ball off to, and that is Caden Durham, who I thought was really good as a true freshman last year at running back for the Tigers. Former 4-star recruit last year, second among all Power 4 true freshmen with 749 rushing yards. The only one who had more was Isaac Brown from Louisville, who we have as the number 2 running back in the country right now. Caden Durham also led all true freshman backs in America with 261 receiving yards. Also really impressive considering LSU, as good as they were in pass blocking, only 96th in team run blocking grade last year too. A brand new offensive line blocking for him, but the Tigers will need Caden Durham to really perform even better as a true sophomore. So the entire weight of the offense, like it was at times last year, is not on Garrett Nussmeier's shoulders.
As a team, they won 5 of their top 6 games of their best rushing grade. Each week last season, when they had balance in this offense. And in the game that sticks out to me, remember they had that big comeback against South Carolina. They were down early. When they started handing Caden Durham the football and they had balance in their offense, that's when they started shredding South Carolina's defense, and that's when they came back in that game. And I just think that was a theme throughout the rest of the season. If they have balance with Durham, with the run game, with the offensive line, and Nussmeier doesn't have to make the 2nd most pass attempts in the country, or the most even this year with McCord gone, then you're talking about, okay, They just get more dangerous. They just need to be two-dimensional. You can't just drop back and throw the football, especially with a guy in Nussmeier who's not going to take off and run. So you're really just old school dropping back, throwing the football.
Definitely. So, Dalton, LSU's got plenty of questions in their defense, in the defensive line, and in the secondary. But according to us, they have the number 2 linebacker unit in college football, really because of 2 players, Harold Perkins Jr. and the guy we're spotlighting here in Whit Weeks.
Absolutely. I mean, you talk about all the transfers, and that's where all the focus is going to be, but the heart and soul of this defense is their middle linebacker, Whit Weeks, right? He reads and reacts to the football in a fantastic fashion. His run defense is terrific. I mean, you're talking about a guy who can do a little bit of everything for you, and I think that's what he is. He is the heart and soul, also top 15 among linebackers in pressures last year. He's a good blitzer. I think he just gives you a little bit of everything, and he's the clear leader of this defense, and he's going to have to be that even more so with Perkins coming back, and even when he was playing linebacker in 2023, struggling a bit in run defense, with all the transfers coming in the secondary and on the defensive line. Whit Weeks is the heart and soul of this defense, and if they're going to get better, especially up front, I think it does start with him, and he just has to take another step in his development and then continue to lead this team.
Yeah, he's a guy who's lived in backfields last year as a true sophomore. 21 tackles for loss or no gain, the 4th most among all linebackers in the country, 25 pressures, top 15 in the country too. He and Harold Perkins, who could rebound really nicely from that torn ACL last year, those are 2 guys who could be 2 of the 5 or so best linebackers that we have in the entire country in college football. Bottom line time now, Dawn. Do we think this offense will be enough for LSU, and do we think the defense will catch up for them to be a college football playoff team? Or are you taking probably the under on their win total, which is right now set at 8.5? What is the bottom line for the LSU Tigers?
They're a tough one. I'll be honest, because I do have a lot of questions. I think if most or all of those transfers hit on defense, this could be a playoff team. How much faith do we have in that, right? Mansour Delane going from the ACC to the SEC now. AJ Halsey going from Houston to LSU. Patrick Payton really underperformed last year. I know he's maybe the biggest name out of all those guys, but he underperformed big time last year at Florida State. Is there enough on defense? And I worry a bit about this offensive line.
Yeah.
Losing 4 starters. And look, I'm not saying the guys that they have aren't talented too, because LSU's always got talent rolling through there. But
probably not Will Campbell, though.
You lost 4, and not just Campbell. You lost 4 guys that got drafted.
Yeah.
I mean, that's heavy with a pocket quarterback who obviously doesn't improvise a whole lot. So that 8.5 number is tough. And I'll tell you what, man, you talk about that offensive line getting a wake-up call. You got to go to Clemson.
Week 1.
You got to go to Clemson week 1. Man, and then 2 weeks later you get Florida, and we just talked about their great defensive line. I'm going to surprise some people. I'm going to go under here.
Wow.
I'm going to do it because I just there's a lot of questions. I think you look for constants in these kind of exercises. Nussmeier's one. It's great to have your quarterback as a constant. The receivers are good. They obviously have a good group of weapons for him to throw to, but I'm worried about the offensive line. We got to see. We're going to find out early. We're going to find out really early. 3 of their first 5 games are Clemson, Florida, Ole Miss. We're going to find out about this defense. I could be wrong on this, and all those guys could come in and be studs for him. Delane, Halsey, Payton. There was another defensive end they got from Florida. I mean, and then you got Perkins coming back. It feels like a lot of variable. If it works, it's going to work. They'll probably go to the playoff if all those defensive guys hit. I need to see it. Because what we've seen the last 2 years from their defense, it's just that's been the reason.
Yeah.
And Nussmeier behind, I think, a mystery of an offensive line. And you're talking about Clemson, Florida, South Carolina and Dylan Stewart, Texas A&M, Alabama, all these great D-lines, Oklahoma, all these great D-lines we're talking about. If their O-line's not settled, it could be a problem. I'm gonna take the under. I'm gonna do it.
With that kind of quarterback too, it's not like it's a very mobile quarterback.
No,
either. That's another issue.
He is not. He can get outside the pocket. He manages the pocket well for his level of athleticism, but he's not gonna take off on you.
I will take the over. If it was 9.5, I probably would take in the under. But it's 8.5. I think LSU. Listen, they've won 10 games in all but last year under Brian Kelly. Brian Kelly, I still think, even though he might be a little bit on the hot seat a little bit at LSU, considering how high their expectations are down there in Baton Rouge, he's still like a top 10 coach in college football, in my opinion, too. They're going to go at least 9-3, in my opinion. I think, the Clemson game, they'll probably start off 0-1. I think Clemson might be the best team in college football. The Bama game at Bama is tough too. Probably won't win that one either. They'll probably lose one more game too. I just don't see them going 8-4 or worse than that. So I'm going to go over for LSU, but there's no denying they need their defense to start catching up to their offense if they want to become a college football playoff contender, which they've not been yet under Brian Kelly. And yes, that offensive line needs to find some stability after losing 4 guys to the NFL draft too. So I'll go over because I do think Garrett Nussmeier, those weapons, Caden Durham now in his sophomore year, they'll be enough. And I do think the defense will improve a little bit. I like some of the transfers they brought in defensively, like Mansour Delane, like A.J. Halsey in that secondary. The secondary will be pretty good. I think LSU go over the 8.5 win total. If it was 9.5, maybe I go under there, but I'll go over for the 8.5 there for the LSU Tigers. Next up is the Mississippi State Bulldogs. Jeff Lebby, his first year at Mississippi State, kind of got off to a rocky start there with the Bulldogs. They're only 2-10 in his first year at the helm. That tied for Mississippi State's worst record in 36 years. Now, Jeff Lebby was brought in as an offensive guru, and their offense was at least average last year. They were 69th in EPA per play, but it was Bulldogs' defensive struggles, which ultimately led to their 10 losses last year. 9th worst team in the country, 3rd worst team in the Power 4 in terms of defensive EPA per play. Now, the offense should have, a similar performance next year, even though they lost 3 of their top 4 receivers, mainly because quarterback Blake Shapen is recovered from a season-ending injury, shoulder injury last year, and also Mississippi State added a very good running back in Fluff Bothwell, we'll talk about later, coming in from the transfer portal to assist in the ground game, but they need that defense to take significant steps forward next year, or else the Bulldogs probably will be one of the worst teams in the Power 4 once again.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think, look, Jeff Lebby's an offensive coach. He was a former offensive coordinator at Oklahoma, and you're talking about a guy that's going to be their base. He wants to play up-tempo, and last year when Blake Shapen got hurt, it really threw that tempo off, right? Because what was it? Michael Van Buren, right, coming in for him, who's now at LSU. He's Nussmeier's backup. So, I mean, you just talk about he had an inexperienced quarterback after Shapen got hurt. When Blake Shapen was healthy early in the year, they had a functional offense, right? So I'm expecting that to be the case. So between Shapen at quarterback, and you mentioned Bothwell at running back, who had a really good year at South Alabama last year, gives them really nice physicality in the backfield. They certainly can function. If they can get into the RPO game, get Bothwell going on the ground, and then just get into Lebby's system that runs at such a fast pace and is so heavy on RPOs. Blake Shapen's got a really good arm when he's clean in the pocket. It's just a matter of, again, keeping him clean against all these monster defensive lines in the SEC. That was really because he got hurt, I believe, against Florida last year, right? That was his last game, and that was even a high-scoring game. So, look, I think the strength when you talk about this team, it's Jeff Lebby. It's his ability to call plays and play with tempo. And then they just got to keep their quarterback healthy, and they can at least function on offense. And I thought that's what they did early last season.
Yeah, bring back Blake Shapen, who was really good last year, the 85-ish passing grade. Fluff Bothwell, mentioned before, had a great true freshman year at South Alabama. And also brought back your leading rusher in Devon Booth, who had a 76.5 rushing grade in 2024. Now, the weakness I mentioned before is how much will this defense improve? 55.3 defensive grade last year, the worst mark in the Power 4 and the second worst defensive grade in all of college football. Mississippi State did add a few projected starters in the transfer portal, but they'll really need to step up in order to improve what was maybe the worst defense, I should say, in the entire country.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, when you're talking about you had a bottom 5 graded defense in the nation, that's where it starts.
Bottom two.
I mean, it just, if you can't make stops, no matter how much you can score, right? We've said it with a couple other teams already, but this was to an extent that was just unsustainable. So they need to take a big step on defense. Look, I think we saw a similar component last year, say with a team like Arizona State, right? Who, they struggled. They went 3-9 the year before. They had to find their attitude on defense and then mix it in with the offensive firepower that they had. But I think that's what you're talking about with Mississippi State is offensively, I think there is going to be progress. I do. It's just a matter of can they make enough stops to keep themselves in games.
Well, Don, a guy who could really help out that offense, a guy who looked pretty good last year in limited time was Blake Shapen, the transfer quarterback from Baylor. Tell me more about him as he kind of recovers from that shoulder injury.
Yeah, so I think Shapen fits. I felt this last year when he transferred in from Baylor. I think he fits this offense well. It's heavy RPO, it's heavy play action, and it's heavy deep shots down the sideline, right? When you look at what Shapen did with those elements last year, 89.5 play action grade. Going back to 2021, the last 4 years, that's a top 25 mark in the country. Jeff Lebby runs a heavy play action, a passing attack, I should say, with RPOs, play action. And last season, small sample, 94.7 passing grade on 10-plus yard throws. The only guys better, Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders, Jackson Dart. Blake Shapen can sling it. If he's healthy and he's kept clean in the pocket, he can sling it. The problem is under pressure, there's some decisions that you really question, right? In his career, a 41.8 passing grade under pressure, he feels the heat. So if they can find a way to protect him and give him enough time to throw it downfield, especially off of play action in the system, he's a good fit. And I think he showed that early last year, but that's what it has to be. He's got to get rid of the ball quickly. They have to find ways to protect him with both protection and the play calling. But Shapen fits. I thought he fit last year. He unfortunately got hurt against Florida. I think over a whole season, they can do some things on offense with him as a quarterback, because it's a lot of the similar things that he showed at Baylor. And he was a solid quarterback at Baylor, and then he goes over here with Jeff Lebby. I think it's a good system for him.
Yeah, so do I. And even if he does get hurt again, Dalton, they brought in Luke Kromenhoek coming in from Florida State. He was the number 4 quarterback coming out of high school in 2024. The only 3 above him, DJ Lagway, Julian Sayin, Dylan Raiola. That's it. So
good players.
Luke Kromenhoek, a guy who's a top 50 recruit coming out of high school. Yes, he's a backup quarterback now, but some really high potential for him as the future starter probably for Mississippi State and Jeff Lebby. He showed some good stuff last year too. He had to start a little bit for Florida State last year. Showed some intriguing stuff for the Seminoles last year too. But Blake Shapen, yes, absolutely. I'm really excited to see what he can do after coming back from that injury. I'm really excited to see what Fluff Bothwell can do in the SEC now. Fluff Bothwell was not a highly rated recruit like Luke Kromenhoek coming out of high school. In fact, Fluff Bothwell was the number 126 running back coming out of high school in the 2024 high school class, but he hit the ground running as a true freshman at South Alabama. A 94 rushing grade last year for Fluff Bothwell. That was 4th among all running backs in America. The only 3 above him, Ashton Ginty, Cam Scadaboo, Damian Martinez. 3 guys who just drafted into the NFL draft and 3 superstars in college football last year. Fluff Bothwell forced a missed tackle on 35% of his carries, tied for 9th among all running backs in the nation. He is a human bowling ball at 5'10", 230 pounds, and he'll try to take his dominance to the SEC this year. Though I was watching his tape as a freshman, just some of the most fun tape I've watched so far.
They give you that same feel as like a Jonah Coleman from Washington, bowling over people constantly. And I don't know. Did you? I read this recently. Do you know why they call him Fluff? It's
why?
His nickname. Obviously, that's what he goes by.
Because 230.
Well, not just that. He was an 11-pound baby.
Damn.
11. Yeah, I'm like,
so he was bowling over kids in the nursery, even as a baby.
Absolutely. I think I read his parents started having him play football at 3 years old because he was just big enough to do it. An 11-pound baby, which props to his mother, honestly, because that's crazy. An 11-pound, I don't know if I've even heard of that. I mean, but you know what now why he's 230 and running people over, absolutely. And to call a 200, doesn't that deceive you a little bit? Call a 230-pound running back Fluff.
I will admit, when I saw the name Fluff Bothwell, I was going to turn on the table. I was like, he's probably like 5'8", 175 pounds. I was like, no, he's 5'10", 230.
You're looking for Darren Sproles.
I judged the book by his cover.
Oh, yeah. Jeez.
He did.
Up. I'm telling you, you want physical?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
He was killing dudes last year.
It gave me the same vibe as like a Jonah Coleman, where I'm like, okay, you're not a 4.3 burner. You're going to hurt somebody.
And the thing is, too, when guys transfer up to the SEC at running back, if they play a more agility-style game, that sometimes doesn't work in the SEC, if you bring physicality at running back, that always translates to the SEC, too. So I'm excited to see what he can do.
Tighten the chin strap when you're tackling him.
Yeah.
For sure. Absolutely.
All right, who is the defensive player spot that we're going to highlight here?
How about another Sun Belt transfer? Let's do this. Let's go down to Old Dominion this time, and they got a safety named Jerron Manning who had a 90 coverage grade last year, and this is one who's kind of an underdog. He was a junior college guy before Old Dominion, goes to ODU last year as their free safety. Actually, I shouldn't even say free safety. He played a lot of different roles in their defense, free, strong, a little bit in the slot, but he ain't afraid of anybody. He's only 5'10" and 195, but he's a physical player. His eyes can read quarterbacks really, really well. I'll tell you what, if you want a backbone at safety, especially a versatile guy to really be an anchor for a defense that's trying to build this thing up, Jerron Manning is a good place to go. I think my favorite thing about him is the way he reads quarterbacks and sometimes the way that he reacts to route concepts. He's got a good idea of what he's looking at on the other side of the ball. He's got good recovery speed, even if he's a step behind. So I think Jerron Manning Manning's going to play a big part in this secondary this year. When you talk about, okay, the first thing you have to do is not give up big plays, he's one of those guys. Only gave up a 26 passer rating into his coverage last year. And keep in mind that 39.6 is spiking the ball into the ground every play. So this is somebody who's got a good read on the football, and you want to make sure you look him off before you throw in his direction.
Absolutely. He was phenomenal last year at Old Dominion. 26 pass rating to his coverage, 6th in America, 90 coverage grade, led all group of 5 safeties to a 2nd in the country. I love watching his tape at Old Dominion too, and it's really cool to see him go from the JUCO level up to Old Dominion, star like that, and now playing at the SEC level at Mississippi State. All right, bottom line time now, Dawn. Mississippi State's win total is only 3.5 right now. I think it's by far the lowest win total we have in the SEC. You're taking the over or under for that win total right now, and what is the bottom line for Jeff Lebby in year 2 with Mississippi State?
That's interesting because that's a weird win total because you sit here and you go, okay, there's 3 games where you have Southern Miss, Alcorn State, Northern Illinois, where you go, okay, you go 3-0 there. Then you're talking, right? Then you go, okay, I just need either one SEC.
Southern Miss added Charles Huff, right?
Yeah, and they got all those Marshall guys coming over. So it's oddly at Southern Miss. It's kind of weird that it's there. So I mean, you have those 3, and NIU's no pushover either.
They beat Notre Dame. Yeah.
But you also have a brutal SEC schedule and an Arizona State game early in the season. I'm still going to take the under. I think this team is another year away. They need another culture building year. And this is more about the rest of the SEC, I think, than it is about Mississippi State. If you're going to compete in this conference with all these great teams that we have, you got to be ready every single week. I just don't quite think they're there yet. I'm going to take the under. I know it's rough to be picking unders on 3.5, but somebody's going to be at the bottom of this conference, and I think this team, they still need another year. Certainly, if you need to make this big a jump on defense, I think it's going to take multiple years.
It's tough, man, because 3.5 is like all you got to do is basically win one SEC game, and you get the over on that.
Well, right. But you mentioned it. Southern Miss with Charles Huff and all those Marshall guys. Northern Illinois. I mean, Northern Illinois is always at least solid. So you're relying on, 3-0 and then 1. But if you lose one of those 3, then you have a real – because their other out-of-conference game is Arizona State. And they're pretty good too. We'll get to them.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go under.
Even like the one SEC game I see that they could win is at Arkansas though. I wish they host Arkansas, maybe they could pull off the upset there, but
it's tough.
Yeah, I'm going under. I hate doing it because I love fluff basketball that much, but I'm going the under on Mississippi State. I think it'll take some time. I do like what they're doing. They're actually recruiting at a pretty good level right now, Mississippi State, and they just did a great job in the portal. Adding a guy like Jerron Manning, one of the highest grade players of safety in the country, adding Fluff Bothell, one of the highest grade running backs in the country. Jeff Lebby knows what he's doing at Mississippi State, and I do have faith in him going forward, but it could be another rough year too for him.
I like Lebby a lot as an offensive coach. Absolutely, I think that part of that side of it's going to get figured out pretty soon. Here, it's the other side. And again, if you're playing all these great teams that they're playing and you can't make stops, it's the shootout thing, but on a level where it's not sustainable to win games. Certainly with what they have on defense.
No, you need immense improvement on defense to escape the basement of the SEC right now. I don't know if that's coming from Mississippi State. Even though I like some of the offensive pieces they have, like Blake Shapen, like Fluff Bothwell, and other guys too, but just don't think there's enough defensively and enough in that receiving core either that I think they're going to make win more than 3 games. So unfortunately, the under, even though it's a low win total for Mississippi State next year, but I do have faith in the program going forward. Before we get to the second half of our SEC preview, we're going to talk about sponsor of the show. That is Fabric by Gerber Life. What does your child's future success look like to you? Excuse me, doing a long show today. Job they're passionate about, traveling around the world, or just being happy and comfortable. Whatever their journey, you can make it easier to achieve with a kid's investment account from Fabric Gerber Life. By making contributions to your child's future today, you can help give them the means to pursue their dreams, big and small. Fabric by Gerber Life was designed by parents for parents to make it easy to plan for and manage your family's financial path. With a kid's investment account from Fabric, you can start investing in your child's future today. Kids can't invest when they're minors, but a kid's investment account allows you to invest on their behalf now, giving their investments more time to grow. It's all online, and setting an account can take you just 5 minutes. Then you can manage your child's account and monitor their investments right from your phone. Funds can be used in really anything, benefiting your child, from tuition and tutors to music classes, and when they're adults and out on their own, they can use the funds for anything that they need. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their family. Start investing in your child today at meetfabric.com/PFFcollege. That's meetfabric.com/PFFcollege. meetfabric.com/PFFcollege. Portfolios managed by Fort Washington Investment Advisors Incorporated. Additional services provided by Apex Corporation. All investing is subject to risk. Learn more at meetfabric.com. All right, second half of our SEC preview. Told you it would be a long one today. Next up is the Missouri Tigers. Now, they did not take a step forward in 2024 and make the college football playoff like we thought they could have, but it was still a very successful year for the Tigers with a 10-3 record. They finished number 22 in the final AP poll. It was the second straight year for Eli Drinkwitz with a double-digit win season and finishing in the top 25. They haven't had two straight years like that in a decade at Missouri. Now, they must replace many key players from last year's team. In fact, only 2 of their 10 most valuable players are back, according to our wins above average metric. But they brought in a really good transfer portal class, including a brand new quarterback that we'll talk about a little bit later as well, to help fill in some of those gaps and keep Eli Drinkwitz's program on an upward trajectory right now. But Dawn, what is the biggest strength of the Tigers right now?
I think, you mentioned that new quarterback in Bo Prabula, who was the second stringer and kind of wildcat role at Penn State the last couple of years, right? And then you look at a back that they brought in the transfer portal in Ahmad Hardy, along with a good offensive line, returning Connor Tollison, Caden Green at guard. They got Keegan Trost in the portal. This could be a team that could really run the football this year, right? In the last couple of years, they've been based in their passing game on offense. They had all the weapons. They had Luther Burden and they had Mookie Cooper and Theo Weiss and all of these guys that they had on this team at receiver, and Brady Cook slinging the ball around. Look, it's not that Bo can't throw the football, but when you have Bo Prabula as your quarterback, you're going to use those dual threat abilities. I think this is a ground game that could frustrate some teams as long as Prabula's out there making the right decisions and complementing it well with the passing game. And Hardy's a really good player that they're getting from the Sun Belt this season. So I think you have a team. Look, Kirby Moore, what I would like to see is more balance in this offense than we saw in 2023. We saw a lot of run game, right? That's when they had Cody Schrader and really heavy play action. It was a really good play action scheme. Got away from that last year. I thought they dropped back and threw the football too much. Get back on the ground, especially with Hardy and Prabula running this ground game, and I think they'll look a lot more, at least a lot. I know they might even have less talent, but it'll look smoother on offense. You'll see better sequencing like we saw 2 years ago.
My biggest question for Missouri right now is, will they have enough of a passing game to complement it? Because as dynamic of a runner as Bo Prabula's been at Penn State, he also only has 56 career pass attempts so far. He's still kind of inexperienced as a collegiate passer right now. Missouri also lost their only 2 receivers last year to even 400 receiving yards in Luther Burden III and Theo Weiss Jr. Now, they did add a former Mississippi State wide receiver, actually, ironically, we just talked about them, and Kevin Coleman, who was really good last year, actually, with 932 receiving yards. But it's highly unlikely he's going to be a superstar like Luther Burden III was. So a quarterback with not a lot of experience as a passer in Bo Prabula, you lose a lot from your receiving core, too. I have some questions that Missouri passing game right now.
Absolutely. I think, and that's going to be the big X factor is can Bo, and we saw in short work last year, obviously the occasional Wildcat thing, and I think that the thing that makes us feel the best about it, and it's a small sample, was, remember last year Drew Aller getting hurt against Wisconsin, and Bo had to come in and play the second half, and Wisconsin's very good defense, especially in the secondary, and he threw it really well. I think he had a 90 passing grade.
Yeah, he did.
90 passing grade or PFF grade. Either way, he threw the ball really well in the second half of that game. It was actually one of the biggest moments in Penn State's season, the highest leverage moment we've seen Prabula play, more than a snap or two at a time. So I think that's what gives you hope. But when you look at Bo, again, you're trying to get the dual threat bit going, right? It's going to be read option. He's dangerous. You look at Penn State, 93 carries, 24 missed tackles forced, 19 explosive runs. Both darn good numbers, especially for a quarterback, right? He's a dangerous athlete, a dangerous runner. And what I see as a passer is somebody who wants to complement this, and this is in part because of Andy Kotelnicki at Penn State. He wants to throw it down the seams. Let's attack down the middle of the field. I think that could be a lot of fun in this offense if they can attack down the seams, especially with a guy like Marquise Johnson on the outside and all the speed that he has. But the question is going to be with this team all season, can Bo Prabula, when they need to and when they're behind in games, can he drop back and throw the football? When you take out the options and you take out the RPOs and the play action and everything else, that's going to be the big question, right? So if he can do that, this team could actually be pretty darn good, because you look across the board, maybe they don't have a whole lot of household names. Missouri's got a good amount of talent on this team, but the quarterback is the biggest question. We know he can run the ball. I think there's certain throws, especially off play action, that he can make, but he's got to do it on a consistent basis now, week in and week out.
Yeah, he's had like a 90 grade in his entire career, basically, at Penn State. So it's not like it's a quality thing for Bo Prabula on the snaps. It's more of a quantity. We just haven't seen, like I said, only 56 career pass attempts so far. So
and other than the Wisconsin game, and even then it wasn't too much because that was a low scoring, and Penn State got that pick six that turned the game around. We've just never seen Bo have to come in and just take a 5-step drop and throw the football, right? Even when he got to throw it, it was play action.
Yep.
It was coming off a read option. Everything was set up by Andy Kotelnicki. Now, that can be the same thing with Kirby Moore, right? Mm-hmm. But when you're playing 12 full games for a season now instead of just, 100-something snaps, it's a lot different. It's a lot different when you have to do it week in and week out. And let's say you're down 6 to Alabama late in the game and you got to drop back into a 2-minute drill. Do you have that in you? If Bo has that in him, Missouri could actually surprise some people.
They could, absolutely. So a bit of an unknown at quarterback in Bo Prabula. What's not an unknown is that Missouri has the best left guard in college football in Caden Green. Really encouraging signs at Oklahoma in 2023 as a true freshman, and he really developed into more of a well-rounded player at Missouri as a true sophomore. One of 6 Power 4 guards this past year who had 75-plus grades both as a pass blocker and as a run blocker. Across 676 career pass blocking snaps, he has only allowed only one sack so far in his career. And like I said before, Dawn, I think he is the best left guard in the country right now.
And don't you love we have numbers at PFF here that can you're allowed to declare something like that? That's just fantastic.
There you go.
Stuff. No, it's a good offensive line.
It is. It's always a good offensive line. Connor Tollison's coming back.
Connor Tollison's. I know they're losing Membu, but Connor Tollison coming back at center is a big thing. This offensive line is still going to be pretty darn good.
Like a top 10 center in the country.
Absolutely. Absolutely he is. And you talk about wanting to run the ball, these guys are good run blockers. So you're talking about now at Missouri, okay, it starts up front. I
love Ahmad Hardy too, man.
Absolutely.
It's another like Fluff Bothwell. Dude, I fell in love with him at the group of 5 level.
That's fun. He's a fun one. I almost thought you were going to go with him, but Caden Green, obviously a worthy choice there too. I'll go on the defensive side for a guy wasn't in the portal, a guy who's been at Missouri for a while. Dalen Carnell, their nickel cornerback, reliable as it gets. I mean, you talk about a guy who plays a lot of roles. He's got good size, 6'2", 215, comes down and tackles, supports in the run, kind of sometimes plays that boxy, kind of third linebacker role that you want from a slot corner. So a little bit bigger than a lot of nickel guys, but I think you look at this secondary too, and you look at Carnell, you look at UNLV transfer Jalen Catalon coming in, but this is the veteran of the group. He's been holding it together both last year, actually for the last 2 years, and now coming into this year. I think he plays a very important role for Missouri's defense in the slot, both in coverage and in run defense. Just a solid, fundamentally sound football player. A little bit bigger, but kind of reminds me a little of all those roles that Malachi Moore used to play at Alabama. He kind of just does a little bit of everything, and he's a smart football player, physical player. So Carnell, as he has been the last 2 years, is a guy to watch on a pretty talented Missouri defense.
All right, bottom line time now. Will Missouri bounce back and be a college football playoff contender once again, Dawn, as they were maybe a couple years ago? Or not really a playoff contender, but a team that really came out of nowhere. Or right now the win total is 7.5 right now. Do we think it'll be over or under that? I will say their strength of schedule is only 47th right now, which is kind of one of the easier ones in the SEC. What do we think for Missouri right now?
God, the books know what they're doing with that, with some of these numbers. That's 7.5 is a good number. They really got me on the fence here. You know what? They're another team, though. I'll tell you, week 2, hosting Kansas.
It's a big game.
Big game for both teams, I think. I think a really big game that's going to tell us a lot about both teams. You want a weird scheduling thing for Missouri, too? Their first 6 games and 8 of their first 10 are at home.
Wow.
They got 8 home games this year, and their first, they don't leave.
How's that happen?
They don't leave Columbia until October 18th. They go to Auburn, and then the next week they go to Vandy. They have their first.
That's insane.
They have 8 of their first 10 games at home, so they can just sit back and go to practice every week and just kind of go with the early. I'm in between on this. I think they might sneak over that. I think I might be feeling like an 8-4, maybe even a 9-3 Missouri again. They didn't have a brutal schedule last year. They lost the 3 big games that they had, right? It was A&M, Bama, and there was one other big game that they lost. I can't remember at the moment. South Carolina beat them. South Carolina beat them late. That was a great game. But they lost the 3 big games, but they've been taking care of business. I think we'll find out a lot early, especially in that Kansas game and an early home game against South Carolina. A rematch of that game is going to be fun, but I'm going to take it. I think they might sneak over that, maybe give you an 8-4 Missouri team. I'll go. Are we starting Bo Leave Did they already do that, you think?
No, they haven't started that.
Okay, all right, sorry. All right, should I patent it before we get to the season?
Oh,
all right. In Columbia, that's what they do. They bow leave. I'm sure Oregon did that a couple years ago, but
I'll go over too. I think they're going to be a tough out. That scheduling is crazy. I did not know that. That's a good call by you.
8 of their first 10 at home, and then they end at Oklahoma and at Arkansas. It's not the worst schedule we've seen.
Honestly, the only game is like they'll definitely lose, or they should lose. That is the Alabama game, I would say. Everything else is like I could see them winning. And now, of course, I don't think they're going to go 11-1. I think they'll probably go 8-4. But I think there's a lot of winnable games on the schedule right now. So I'm going to go over 2, man. I like what Missouri's got. I think especially that run game. That run game could be dynamic next year.
Well,
that O-line, Bo Pribula, Ahmad Hardy, I love that Missouri rush.
But I'll tell you, too, and when we're just over halfway through this, I feel like we're going through more and more teams where we go, well, if the quarterback,
exactly,
right? Like even the big ones like Georgia and Texas we're getting to, and some of these others where the next one we're getting to is certainly another one where
Alabama too, yeah.
But Alabama, you just go, well, if the quarterback's good, then you never know what could happen. I think Missouri, otherwise, they have a lot of talent on that team. They're good.
I mean, look at through it right now. The only proven guys we talked about so far is Garrett Nussmeier, Taylor Greenish. That's really it. Everyone else is
Sellers. Obviously Sellers had a good year.
Where you're hoping, exactly.
I mean, there's a lot of quarterback questions, which makes these are going to make these over-unders going back.
Oh, we're going to look horrible. We're going to look so bad a year from now. But yeah, I'll go over 2 for Missouri. I like what they got. I think 7.5 is a little bit low for what the talent they have in that roster right now. They should make a bowl game pretty easily and be a tough out in the SEC. Next up is the Oklahoma Sooners right now, who took a major step forward in 2023 under Brent Venables and another major step back in 2024. 2023, they had a 10-3 record that year. You got a big contract extension for that. Came crashing back down to earth with a 6-7 record this past year. In fact, it's the second time they've had a 6-7 record in the last 3 years under Brent Venables. For reference, the Sooners had not had a losing campaign since in the 21st century before he took over. So the entire 21st century before Brent Venables, they had not had a losing season. They've now had 2 in his 3 years as the head coach. Now, he's a defensive guy, right? Former Clemson defensive coordinator. They've had a pretty good defense under him. The issue is the offense has not been very good at all. They had a ton of injuries on that offense in the receiving core and in that offensive line. The lowest offensive grade in the Power 4 last year with a 60.2 offensive grade. Now, I mentioned before, the defense that got them bowl eligible. They had the 12th best defensive grade in the country with a 91.4 grade as a unit. And Dalton, they have a really strong defense once again in 2025. And also they added a quarterback in John Mateer, a lot of people are excited about, and Jay Knott, a running back who's a top 15 running back in the country. But there's still some serious concerns on that side of the ball. But once again, Oklahoma should have a really good defense.
It's Brent Venables, right? That's exactly what you would expect. They're losing a couple of the leaders, but you look at their D-line with R. Mason Thomas, with Grayson Halton, guys like that. You look at their secondary. I love Eli Bowen. Man, that kid is a true freshman. Last year was great. You have Peyton Bowen also. You have, there's another safety. I'm now blanking on his name because he's Robert Spears Jennings. That's it. They just have a complete defensive unit, 12th highest ranked defense, graded defense, I should say, in the country last season. And it's just their offense didn't give them any sort of help, right? So they're trying to get in these grinded out defensive games. But I think this team, when you look at their strength, it's a reflection of their head coach. It's what Brent Venables always had at Clemson, was elite defense. He's going to have that now. It's just a matter of if they can score enough points. The game I go back to is that early season game against Tennessee, where they lose 19-10 or something like that. I mean, you just can't. You have to find a way to help your defense when they're playing that well against elite offenses.
Yeah, biggest question is, once again, will they have a competent passing game in 2025? A 55.5 offensive grade on passing plays last year, the worst in the Power 4 and tied for the 4th worst in the entire country. Their struggling offensive line remains pretty much the same from last year, and their leading returning receiver was Deion Burks. He had 238 yards last year in only 5 games. And of course, Deion Burks is a much better player than that, and now is a fully healthy player. Should be a lot better in 2025, but still, he's your leading returning receiver from last year, and he had less than 250 yards last year. Now, John Mateer is in a quarterback, right? A lot of people are excited about him. He's a better runner than he is a passer, though, right now. He only had a 70.8 passing grade at Washington State last year, and it's worth mentioning Washington State was basically playing a Mountain West schedule last year. So going up to the SEC now, how will he look as a passer at Oklahoma? That is a question mark. Despite it being a really good runner, you talk about in just a second, Dalton, he's a great runner, maybe the best runner we have at quarterback in college football, but there's still some issues with him as a passer you get into right now.
Yeah, this feels like a lightning rod, doesn't it? Like whichever way we go about this, we won't ruffle any feathers at all. But let's go with what we saw from Mateer. Now, you mentioned the 70 passing grade. The last 3 or 4 games of last year, he really turned that on. He got hot down the stretch at the end of the season. But the first thing you notice about Mateer, plays at a fast pace. He's a playmaker, okay? Tied for the most missed tackles forced. 54 missed tackles forced, most among quarterbacks last season, okay? So there's that. Over 1,000 yards rushing when he gets to scrambling outside the pocket on pass plays. He's really an electric runner. I don't care what level of football he's playing at. You can see that he's a darn good athlete. The question is going to be, as a passer, there's 2 things about the athleticism. One, he allowed, so we at PFF, we keep track of when a quarterback is responsible, when he's holding the ball too long or when he runs into pressure. 33.7% of the pressure he faced, he was held at least partially responsible for.
Somewhere third.
Second highest rate in the country. Okay, so you're talking about a guy who holds the ball too long, sometimes likes to play sandlot football a little bit more than he should. Now, is he really good at it? Sure. The other thing, too, is his footwork can be kind of antsy as he wants to move and he throws from this kind of lower 3/4 delivery. Accuracy is not great. 52.5% of his passes charted as accurate for our quarterback charting. 100th out of 123 quarterbacks with 200 pass attempts. So it's kind of frenetic. He's a dynamic athlete. He's a really good runner. And I got to think Oklahoma's a little bit inspired to play the way they did against Alabama last year when Jackson Arnold was running all over Alabama. Go, okay, it's in there. The quarterback run game, especially with the next guy you're about to talk about paired in there with them. This could be a dynamic run game, but Mateer, he's going to have to get used to the SEC speed of play, understand when to take his shots, and then again, don't play sandlot football too often. He can throw it. He throws a nice ball. He can rip the deep ball downfield.
Different
especially
arm angles too, like sidearm.
Different arm angles. When he throws it on time, he can work it vertically. It's just a matter of not trying to play hero ball all the time. And that's the part I'd be worried about. Again, with maybe the offensive line questions and the supporting cast questions that we still kind of have about Oklahoma.
Yeah, definitely. But what Oklahoma should have is a really good read option game if you want to run that kind of offense, because John Mateer, maybe the best runner at quarterback in the country, and Jay Nott is a top 15 running back in the country too. Last year, he was our number 4 running back in college football. Disappointing junior year though, only had 385 rushing yards at Cal. Now, most of that was due to a nagging ankle injury that he had all of last year, and also California's offensive line was a disaster with the 20th worst run blocking grade in college football with a 54.1 mark. He was still our honorable mention in our top 10 running backs list. Of course, you can watch that video if you want to watch it too, because of his dominance over his first 2 years at California. Across 2022 and 2023, 108 forced missed tackles were the 6th most among all Power 4 tailbacks, 1,394 yards after contact, 7th most among Power 4 running backs, and 517 receiving yards, 6th most among Power 4 running backs. So Jay Nott, with a fully healthy season and a quarterback who could really run in John Mateer, he could all of a sudden reemerge as a top 5, top 10 running back in the country like we thought he was before the injuries kind of robbed him last year.
No, there's an idea here with this Oklahoma offense, and I think it might even be Brent Venables' idea himself, is look, ball control, let's be the more physical team. Let me coach my elite defense because I'm going to have it. I got a boatload of talent on this side. But we went and got John Mateer, who obviously was one of the most sought-after names at quarterback in the portal this year. And then when Jay Nott came free in the spring, that's big because we got to remember, that's a recent thing. Jay Nott is he's the newest guy to the Oklahoma program. But what he showed you 2 years ago, you all of a sudden think about what could be a dynamic running game for Oklahoma. They got to complement it with the passing game. But if you have 2 rushing threats like this playing at the top of their game, you got a real problem back there in the backfield.
They're going to play smash mouth football for sure with that running game and with that elite defense next year. And Dawn, who should be one of the top defenders next year?
So many guys we could talk about. Let's go on the interior. I feel like we've had a good amount of defensive tackles today. We're going to keep that going. How about Grayson Halton? Look, playing a little over 400 snaps last year in a kind of a deep rotation, that Oklahoma defensive line, but 13.6% pressure rate over the last 2 years. Really good number for an interior defender, right? So you're talking about a guy who 6'2", 290, a little bit quicker, got the athleticism inside, gives you, some guys are those stout run stoppers, not Grayson Halton. He's going to be rushing the passer from the inside, while our Mason Thomas has an explosive first step off the edge. This pass rush is a real problem, right? So when you talk about this front seven for Oklahoma, they're not the issue. They had a young secondary last year, had some lapses in coverage, but they were the 12th best defense in the country last year for our grading because of the front seven, and a big reason for it was Grayson Halton on the inside.
The highest pressure rate among returning FBS D tackles, highest pass rush win rate among returning power forward D tackles. He's a top 10 D tackle in my country, in my opinion, in college football right now. All right, Dalton, over-under time and bottom line time now for the Sooners. Right now, the over-under is set at 6.5. Do you think they're going to go over or under that win total? Really, will they have a winning season with Brent Venables next year? And ultimately, what is the bottom line for Oklahoma football?
The bottom line is Brent Venables really needs to have a good year.
They can't afford another losing season.
I
know they gave him a huge extension, so I don't think they'll fire him after a bad year.
And the win totals. I wish I could wait to answer this question until after week 2 when they play Michigan.
Literally just gonna say that's a huge game for both.
Oklahoma,
programs.
Michigan. It might be
similar.
It might be the best game of week 2. Man, I wish I could answer that after. And then they play their first SEC game is Auburn, and I think both of these teams are in very similar standing where it's. All right, you have talent. Are you going to win with that talent? The difference is Auburn's schedule is a lot easier than Oklahoma. The hard part is they found a way to go 6-6 with that team they had last year. This is the hard part. Or I guess they didn't get over the 6.5 though. I guess that's the question. Are they better than last year?
I don't know.
That's the hard part.
The offense has to be better. You can't get worse.
With Mateer and Ott, you would think.
It can't be worse. No, is the defense as good as it was last year, though?
But if they go out there and lose week 2 to a really young Michigan team at home, they're not hitting it. Have you seen this SEC schedule?
I know. I'm going under. I hate doing it, but I'm going under. I like the ground game they have there. I still have questions at the receiving core. I still have questions on the offensive line. I still have questions with Mateer as a passer. You lose Danny Stutzman, your heart and soul of your entire program. I'm going under. I hate doing it.
They're going to win. They got 3 wins out of conference. Are they going 4-5 otherwise?
Think about it. They needed an upset over Alabama to even make a bowl game last year too. That came out of nowhere. That game. I don't know.
You're killing me. But I guess Ole Miss, South Carolina, Tennessee. This might be the hardest one.
This is really hard. This is really hard.
I'm gonna go with that. I'm gonna go with they went 6-6 last year, and they should be better. I don't know that
it can't get worse.
I don't think it's a huge step better.
No,
7 or 8. I'll go. I'm so in between.
It's quite literally the worst offense in the Power 4 last year, so it's hard to get worse. And I think they improved it. I will say. I think they now healthy Deion Burks, Mateer, Ott.
I'll take them to find their way to get to 7 or 8. But if they go out there and lose to Michigan at home in week 2 to maybe a true freshman quarterback,
at home too,
that might be a death knell with that. I'm gonna go over. I don't. Some people think they're a playoff contender. I don't think so on this schedule with their offensive questions. I'll take the over. This is a big fence one. I'll take it. I'll go. I'll take a 7 or 8 win Oklahoma team. Maybe 7. I'm
going under. Listen, they should have a smash mouth brand of football once again with that run game, with that defense. But I need serious improvement from that offensive line and in that passing game. If they want to make any sort of noise in the SEC like they should be.
And we are going to know early. These 2 games that they have early against Michigan and Auburn.
Yeah.
Whoa, we're going to find out a lot.
Not only huge games for Oklahoma, huge games for Michigan and Auburn,
for
too.
all of them, all those teams. I mean, just the number of huge early season games for a couple of these teams in this conference is ridiculous.
Yeah. All right, I'm going under for Oklahoma. Storied program at Oklahoma, unfortunately, is going to have another 6-win season probably or somewhere, at least in my opinion, going into next year. Next up is another school that disappointed, for us at least, is the Ole Miss Rebels. Dawn, we had Ole Miss as a top 5 team in the country entering the year. They were number 6 in the country in the preseason AP poll. They failed to make the college football playoff even with that, though. Still, even after a disappointing 2024, it has been an historic 2 years for Ole Miss over the last 2 years. They've won 21 games across the last 2 years, their most in a 2-year stretch in program history. Now, Ole Miss must replace a ton of stars from last year's squad, including a pair of first-rounders and defensive tackle Walter Nolan and quarterback Jackson Dart. They do have a new quarterback in Austin Simmons, who played a little bit in that Georgia game, led a touchdown drive in that Georgia game, showed some flashes as a redshirt freshman with an 82 PFF grade, and he has an outstanding receiving core to work with. The big question is, will that Ole Miss defense, that really was the best part of their entire team last year, will it take a step back after losing so many stars from last year's squad? But Dawn, Austin Simmons is a brand new quarterback. He's got a great receiving core to throw to.
Yeah, you know what's funny is the first thing is the more, I'll get more on Simmons in a second, but the more I was watching the little bit we've seen of Austin Simmons, and then you look in the portal and you look at all the guys they got. Dejon Stribling from Oklahoma State, who was probably their best player last year. Trey Wallace from Penn State, who was, as much as you hate to admit it, probably their best wide receiver last year. Caleb Odom, Caden Lee staying in the slot, he had a good year last year. Daquan Wright at tight end, Luke Haas at tight end, two guys who give you two different dimensions, and you go, they're still going to find a way to score points in Oxford. Absolutely. You've got Lane Kiffin. I think Austin Simmons is really talented, but you look at the weapons. He's got at least 6 legitimate weapons to work with on the outside as long as he's protected. I could see Simmons very quietly with this group of weaponry having a solid statistical year at least. We'll see with some of the other elements of their team if they can win enough SEC games to be at the top of contending there. But this receiving core, they lost some guys. I mean, you lost, Trey Harris. You lost Jordan Watkins, who was a big piece, Caden Prieskorn, Jackson Dart, your quarterback. This passing game is still going to be pretty darn good. I have faith that Austin Simmons is going to have a good year, especially with the weapons he has around him.
Yeah, my number 4 receiving core in the country, and maybe the best tight end room in college football between Luke Haas and Daquan Wright. And then, of course, they have really, really good wide receivers, too. And like I mentioned, Stribling, Wallace, and Caleb Odom, too. And Caden Lee coming back too. The biggest weakness is a defense that lost many elite pieces. Now, of course, Ole Miss had a 93.3 defensive grade last year, tied with Ohio State for the best in college football. It's kind of crazy to say a Lane Kiffin coach team had arguably the best defense in the country last year, or at least one of them. However, Ole Miss did lose their 10 most valuable defensive players from last year, according to our wins above average metric. That includes 5 players who were taken in the 2025 NFL draft, including a first-round pick in Walter Nolan at D tackle, Prince Lee Monmielen. He's gone from that unit too. Just a ton of stars from that Ole Miss defense that was loaded everywhere, especially in that front 7. All of them are really much gone right now. So it's kind of question of, okay, will it go back to being a Lane Kiffin coach team where it's great offense, but will the defense really hold them back? Or will they just kind of keep humming along and find the new stars in that defense right now?
Right. That's the big question. Look at the names you're losing. Nolan, right? Chris Paul in the middle, who was so good for them last year, transferring in. Prince Lee Monmiel and Trey Amos at corner was a second-round pick himself. I mean, you're losing absolute stars on one of the best defenses in the country. And at a school not generally known for their defense, they did a great job last year. It's why you feel like last year was a missed opportunity, because that might have been a top 5 or 6 defense in college football last year, and they just found a way to lose a couple of upset games. This is a team that really, you hate to dwell back on it because we're doing a preview of the coming season.
Sure.
They should have made the playoff last year with the talent they had. No, they had really one of the 7 or 8 most talented teams in the country.
If you go back to our 2024 preview for Ole Miss, when we were so high on them saying they're the 4th best team in the country, we said this offense is going to be elite. If we knew that defense would be tied for the highest grade in the country, you and I might have been like, they're going to win the national title.
We might have picked them to win the whole thing. I mean, but it's just, but again, it's why you play the games, right? It's why you have a 12-game season that you can't. And they made one mistake.
Can't lose to Kentucky.
They made one mistake early, and they had a chance to bounce back from it. And they even beat Georgia. They finally beat Georgia.
Yeah.
And then the Gator game and everything happened in that. So, look, it feels like a missed opportunity, but got to bounce back. I still think they're going to be able to score points. Defense is one thing, but let's talk about Austin Simmons here, because I really do have faith in this offense, right? And I know we only saw him 34 dropbacks last year, but the little bit that we did see, look, we got a southpaw sophomore coming, but I like what I saw from him last year, right? And you're talking about a kid who's got a strong arm. He's a decent athlete. Maybe a similar-ish athlete, maybe slightly less than Jackson Dart, but if you're talking about Lane Kiffin looking for a guy who can throw the ball vertically from the pocket, I think he's got his guy in Austin Simmons, and I was really impressed. I thought at the time before they lost to Florida, I actually thought the moment of their season was early in the first quarter of the Georgia game when Jackson Dart turns his ankle. Austin Simmons has to come in for a drive, and he leads him down for a touchdown. And from that moment, I'm like, you know what? This kid can lead this offense. Now, Dart came back in when they won the game anyway, but I really think, look, you're talking about a guy with enough arm, functional mobility, good understanding of this system. He's already been in it for 2 years now. I really think this is going to be a quarterback that we look back at the end of the season and go, you know what? He's one of the better ones in the SEC. He's going to put up good numbers with this weaponry that he's got with Stribling and Wallace, especially. I like that those guys can get vertically. So I think for him, there's not enough of a sample for me to get a read on, okay, what is he not good at? What are the weaknesses? Because he only, again, 34 dropbacks. But we'll find out. We're just going to find out. You're playing SEC defenses every week, but I think he's a good fit. I think he's good. I really do. I think this offense is going to have a good year and compete with a lot of really good teams in the SEC. I think Simmons is going to be a big piece.
I don't know what game we were at, but we're in the press box of some game we were at when the Georgia Ole Miss game was going on. And remember, Jackson Dart went down with that injury, and you and I looked at each other like, that's it.
That drive. Had they just beaten Florida and made the playoff, to me, that drive would have been the moment of their season. Because I think Simmons did he go 6 for 6 or something on that drive?
He scored a touchdown.
He went 5 for 6, and they were down 7-0. You're down 7-0. I believe it was at Georgia, and your starting quarterback gets hurt. Panic mode. 10 out of 10, right? Sirens. And he comes in just very calm, leads a drive against Kirby Smart in the Georgia Bowl. And that's really what sparked what should have been a playoff run until they lost to Florida. But that was the moment of their season to me. And I think he's got the composure. And even anytime he's coming in mop-up duty, he's looked solid. So I believe in this offense. I really do. They got a loaded group of weapons. And you could have picked any one of them for this spot here. But I know we both like this guy and the bit that we saw from him from where he's transferred in from.
Yeah, a top 10 tight end, in my opinion, in college football, I believe, or maybe he's my honorable mention tight end. Number 10 for me, actually, Luke Haas coming in from Arkansas. Big fan of this guy. Big reason why I think Ole Miss might have the best tight end room in the country between him and Daquan Wright, who's probably top 15 tight end in college football too. But Luke Haas transferred in from Arkansas, 82.3 receiving grade across his first 2 years, 10th among all tight ends in the nation, and 4th among all returning tight ends in college football. A 147.7 passer rating when targeted over the last 2 years, the third best among all tight ends in the country. A really good athlete at 241 pounds, can get down the seam really well. And Dalton, he has yet to drop a pass in his college career so far.
Kind of like a more athletic version of what they just lost in Caden Prieskorn.
A little bit, yeah.
Kind of like that, get up the seams, and I like that he's got a different dynamic than Daquan Wright, who I think is going to get a lot of RPO and after the catch work. Haas is really good. If you don't know about him yet, check the Arkansas tape. He's going to be good for this team.
Absolutely. But Dalton, really the only kind of defender that really came back to this team, a guy that a lot of other people are really high on, and we still think he's a really good player, is Centurion Perkins here.
He is a good player. He's a weird player. He's listed at 6'1" and 210, but he's an edge player, and he's their best returning pass rusher. And look,
it's like a safety size.
There's no denying what he can do off the edge. I think it was 11 sacks last year that he had. I mean, there's no denying the speed. Even they use him sometimes as a quarterback spy against more mobile quarterbacks. Centurion Perkins. The one thing I do see about him is when he started to struggle late in the season, it's because teams are just handing the ball off and running right at him, right? And with an edged player that's 6'1", 210, you should be able to do that. But when you talk about a guy who can really rush the passer, and it's weird, even at times he can long arm and kind of use whatever length he does have, right? He's obviously got leverage in a guy that small. So, we've talked a lot about in the past some undersized pass rushers. I don't think anybody epitomizes that more than Centurion Perkins, but he is, at the college level, at least a darn good football player and a dangerous one off the edge for him.
What is it with these undersized edge rushers in the SEC named Perkins? Harold Perkins at LSU had the same issue. It was like he's too small to play edge rusher. Centurion Perkins, too small to play edge rusher too, but yet they're out there and they're really good pass rushers too. I know Harold Perkins is now playing more off ball, and I think Centurion Perkins might play a little more off ball this year for Ole Miss. Now Chris Paul gone. But it's going to be interesting to see what he could do as a junior, man, just because he's the build of a safety, but he's playing edge rusher. It's a very weird evaluation for him.
Well, at a certain point, when you're not yet in the NFL, like college, high school, anything like that, an athlete is an athlete.
Yeah.
And so Darren Perkins is a really darn good athlete. So there's obviously...
He's a 5-star coming out, yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, there's no question he's a terrific athlete, and he's an excellent pass rusher. It's just that how often can you sustain him being on the field? I mean, he played almost 600 snaps last year, which is a lot. But that's what you're going to get. The tape got shown the second half of last year. Run right at him.
Yeah.
If you see him, audible at the line of scrimmage, run right at him. Just go at him because he's only 210, right? You got to essentially, that's what you have, a linebacker playing off the edge. So dangerous player. Definitely right now, I would say their best pass rusher. It's going to be the question of this Ole Miss defense now that he's like the star of it, right? I mean, they lost so many pieces that do they have enough surrounding him on this defense?
I will say he had an 81.8 coverage grade when he had to play off ball last year.
Oh, he's an athlete.
So he could do it. And we saw Harold Perkins have a really good coverage grade too at linebacker too. So maybe Suntory and Perkins will have kind of the same career arc as Harold Perkins. Bottom line time now, Dalton, the win total for them, I believe, is 8.5. Yeah, so 8.5 from FanDuel. Taking the over-under for that, and what do you think for the Ole Miss Rebels? Can this be kind of a playoff contender in 2025, do you think?
I think they need a year. I think they need a reset year. I question their offensive line a bit. Their offensive line was not great last year. And I think when you look at that win total, you go, there are a good number of winnable games. I'm looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe up to 7 games where I go, yeah, they should win. So the win total gets funky when you get to 8.5. But I don't look at them this year as the same level of contender that they were last year. I don't think they're a playoff team unless Simmons comes out and gives us some sort of surprise Heisman-level season. 8.5 was the number. Mm-hmm. I'm going to go under on it. I think they need a year to not reset because I think still their offense is going to be good, but retool a little bit. I'm feeling maybe a 7 or 8 win season. The lack of depth on defense and their offensive line I'm still worried about in certain matchups. They'll make a bowl game because I'm seeing a lot of wins in their schedule, certainly enough to make a bowl game. But for this team, for last year's team to go 9-3, even with a couple of errors mixed in, this team I don't think is as good as last year, and I'm going to go with that. And Ole Miss, they're out of conference is usually kind of soft, so I'm going to take the under 8.5. I don't think they're matching last year's win total.
I'll go over. I think they'll win 9 games.
That's the one thing is there's 6 or 7 here that are like, yeah, they should still.
Yeah, it's like it's the 33rd hardest schedule in the country, which in the SEC is actually not that hard at all compared to some other schools are facing out there. So you got that going for you. I like what they have some offensively. Yeah, I'll go over 8.5. I think they'll get to 9-3. I don't think it'll be much more than that, though. And listen, yes, last year was a massive missed opportunity for Ole Miss. It really was their first opportunity since like the 1960s to be competing at the top of college football. They missed it last year. 2025 isn't nearly as loaded as last year's team, but there's still enough talent for Lane Kiffin to have a top 25 team in college football going into next year. Maybe a team that's in the playoff race for the first half or so of the season before they kind of maybe lose a couple games and fall out of that race. But I still think Ole Miss will go above 8.5 and go 9-3 next year. All right, another school we're talking about as maybe a playoff contender in 2025 is the South Carolina Gamecocks. Really disappointing year in 2023, the 5-7 record. They bounced back in a major way this past season with a 9-4 record. They just missed out on making the college football playoff. They were one of the final schools that got left out of the college football playoff, and they ultimately ended up number 19 in the final AP poll, which is their highest finish since Jadeveon Clowney's final season in 2013. And like that 2013 team, their defense really drove their success in 2024, tying for 8th with a 91.8 defensive grade last year. They did lose plenty of talent from that side of the ball, but they do return a top 10 player in the country, in our opinion, an edge rusher, Dylan Stewart. His development, alongside a couple other freak athletes in Lenora Sellers and Nick Harbor at wide receiver, really could determine whether or not South Carolina will be a college football playoff team in 2025.
Certainly have the top-end talent. This team is not as deep as they were last year, but Sellers is a 6'3", 240-pound athletic freak at quarterback. Nick Harbor, like you just mentioned, might be a more freakier version of DK Metcalf if he can figure out some of the finer points of playing the position. And then you mentioned it. Look, last year the defense was the headliner. Dylan Stewart is the headliner this year. It's not as thick a defense as they had last year. A lot of those pieces graduated, got drafted, but this is a potential. If he wasn't coming out the same year as some quarterbacks in Jeremiah Smith, Dylan Stewart's the type of pass rusher that could go number 1 overall in a draft one day, right? So you're talking about the top-end talent that's good enough to scare any team that they play across from them, right? And they had it obviously last year and even a lot more depth, but when you still have players like that, like Sellers, like Harbor, like Stewart, that's a problem because games can get away from you real quick on the other side.
You could argue Lenora Sellers, the freakiest athlete at quarterback in the country. Dylan Stewart, the freakiest defensive lineman in the country in terms of how athletic he is. And And then Nick Harbor is the freakiest athlete overall in college football. We'll talk about him in just a second when we get to the offensive player spotlight, but some of the freakiest athletes in the nation are playing for the Gamecocks right now. Now, the question mark is, will the offensive line be a major issue for South Carolina like it's been in the last 2 seasons for them? Over the last 2 years, South Carolina had the 100th offensive line grade in 2024, 115th in 2023. They have a lot of pressure on 40.1% of their passing plays over the last 2 years, the 3rd worst rate in the Power 4. They also must replace all 3 starters from their interior offensive line, and there's 2 returning tackles, Kason Henry and Josiah Thompson, each had sub-60 PFF grades last year. Now, Josiah Thompson was very close to being a 5-star recruit. He was starting a lot as a true freshman last year, so a lot of upside for him there at offensive tackle, but you need him to hit, and you need Kason Henry to get a lot better at the other tackle spot, and then you need a brand new interior offensive line to improve a lot because, Dawn, this offensive line over the last 2 years when Rattler was there, Spencer Rattler was there, and then even last year with North Sellers, this really held back the offense.
Well, they're lucky they have Sellers to bail him out of a lot of sacks, right? At 240 pounds, and he's one of the hardest players in the country to tackle. I mean, let's just dive right into it, right, with all that coming together. Lenora Sellers is... he's in the Anthony Richardson, Jalen Milroe, just super toolsy category, right? 4th in the nation in deep passing grade last season. What was it? What did you tell me? 18 missed tackles forced against Clemson?
Quarterback record for PFF.
I mean, one of the most dynamic runners maybe you're ever going to see at the quarterback position. 6'3", 240, freakish athlete, but the passing started to catch up. He struggled in the first half of the year, and then an 80 passing grade from week 8 onward. That's what gives you hope. He started to dial it back just a little bit. South Carolina started emphasizing more yards after catch and telling him, hey, you're not the only athlete out here. Let these other guys do the job. So I think when you talk about sheer tools, arm strength, the ability to run, the ability to scramble and improvise and do all those fun things that we love watching every week, there's not many better at it than Sellers, if any, right now in college football. The question, a lot like we talked about earlier with DJ Lagway, is inconsistency. 70.9 passing grade on throws under 20 yards last year, 87th in the country, right? So it's accuracy, it's throwing the ball on time. It's not just relying on your natural ability to win every single time, right? There's a chance that Sellers could be an elite player. The other thing is ball security. 4.6% turnover-worthy play rate is too high, right? Sometimes loose with the football when you're trying to improvise. So look, I won't sit here and tell you he doesn't have a boatload of talent. He does, but to me it's very similar to DJ Lagway at Florida, where I need you to do the little things. I need you to get a little bit more accurate underneath, play a little more fundamentally sound, more consistently, and then we could be talking about what everybody's hyping up as a first-round or possibly top 10 pick.
Another guy, Dalton, who could be a first-rounder, top 10 pick if he just hits on the tools this guy has, is his top receiver in Nick Harbor. He is, without a doubt, the freakiest athlete in college football. In fact, friend of the show, Bruce Feldman, a great college football reporter for The Athletic, he puts out an incredible list every year of just ranking the 100 or so freakiest athletes in the country. In Nick Harbor's true freshman year, he was the number 1 player on that list. In Nick Harbor's true sophomore year, he was the number 1 player on that list. He's the only player ever who's been the number 1 freak athlete on Bruce Feldman's list for multiple seasons. Why? This guy is 6'5". This guy is 235 pounds, and this guy was a second-team All-American as a sprinter for South Carolina's track team. Usually guys that size are like maybe not shot put, but like other at strength events like that. He's a second-team All-American as a sprinter. He ran a 10-1 in the 100-meter dash, a 20.2 in the 200-meter dash, and the U.S. invited him to the Olympic trials, and he said, "No, I'm going to focus on football." This guy could be an Olympic-level sprinter at 6'5", 235 pounds, which is basically like a tight end size nowadays, too. Now, of course, he's relatively raw as a receiver right now. There's no denying that. But he did lead the Gamecocks in receiving yards last year, albeit being 376 receiving yards last year. If he can show some more nuance as a route runner, as a junior, and improve his hands a little bit, Dalton, this is the kind of athlete that NFL teams do not let fall out of the first round if he can show a little bit more of nuance and a little more development in his game as a junior.
Absolutely. I mean, you're talking about a guy, we're not even asking for elite route running. If a guy that size, that fast, is an average route runner, he's going to be a star in the league. He's, at the very least, he's going to be DK Metcalf. Yeah. That's exactly, because Metcalf's not the most nuanced route runner in the NFL either. You know, we're not asking him to be Justin Jefferson. If he just puts a little bit of polish on this, there's nobody that can stop that. 6'5", I mean, those are Calvin Johnson type things you're talking about, right? But we have to see it, right? He less than 400 receiving yards last season. He really was just kind of a straight line runner, so it doesn't work like that in football. In football, it's about your ability to change direction and stop and start at any given moment, right? So certainly when you talk about just freak athletes, I mean, guys 235 pounds, they shouldn't run 10-1s. No. That's silly. That's reserved. Even if you're that tall, like even a guy like Usain Bolt was that tall, he wasn't 235. No. That's not that's a freight train. That's crazy, right? So, I mean, you're talking about the idea of Sellers having an 80-yard arm and Harbor speed. Sounds great. It certainly does. You've got a couple of freaks out here, but everything in between, they got to execute, right? They got to get to be more consistent football players to get there.
And listen, we mentioned before, South Carolina's got 3 of the freakiest athletes in the country. 2 of them got to get a lot more consistent, and Lenora Sellers and Nick Harbor to really hit on their true ceilings. But Dawn, the one guy who doesn't really need to get that much better because he's already maybe the best pass rusher in the country, Dylan Stewart, a top 10 player for us already heading to his true sophomore year.
Yeah, this is a guy who all he needs to be maybe the best defensive player in the country is maybe 8 or 10 more pounds of muscle than he had last year to hold up in run defense. But you talk about it, just a freak show of a pass rusher. 91.4 pass rush grade as a true freshman. 6th best in the country, 51 pressures. I mean, he came out immediately in his first game against Old Dominion and just absolutely tore it up, and then did it to the SEC really for the rest of the year. I mean, just you talk about – it's funny because that defense of South Carolina last year was absolutely loaded, and yet Stewart was still the best player on their team. I mean, it's just a ridiculous level of talent, and not just athletic talent. The pass rush moves and the arsenal coming from him as a true freshman last year and now coming up as a true sophomore, right around 250 pounds? Yeah. I mean, the sky's the limit. That's all you can really say with Dylan Stewart. I know we've talked about him a lot this summer. He's your number 2 edge rusher in the country behind another guy we're going to talk about in a little bit. But, I mean, just a freak of nature. That's what they have on this defense. And they lost a lot of pieces on this defense, but they certainly stand a chance with Stewart running off the edge there.
Yeah, my number 2 edge rusher in the country, and he's already the best pass rusher in the country, in my opinion, as only a true sophomore. If he can get a little stronger in run defense, he's could absolutely be the number 1 player at edge rusher in the country, and a future top 5 pick probably, regardless too. All right, Dawn, the win total is set at 7.5 for South Carolina right now. Can this be a college football playoff contender, or do you think you'll take the under on that and be more of a solid team in the SEC?
7.5. I think I'm going under.
Wow, really?
I think I'm going to do it because I like the top end talent a lot. Right, Sellers, I do need to see another step as a passer. Right, they're losing. I mean, you talk about what they lost. They're replacing Rocket Sanders at running back, and as of this recording, because I know these are going to get cut separately and probably resolved after we get done with this and it's put out, but Rasul Faison, the running back, is going to be getting a hearing about his eligibility on July 9th. So we don't know. That's up in the air, and he was a 1,000-yard back at Utah State last year. Nick Harbor's a great idea. Yeah. But right now he's an idea. They're replacing Josh Simon at tight end, right? Albeit they got Jordan Dingle from Kentucky, right? And the bigger thing, the 2 big things for me are, 1, you still have questions about this offensive line that has struggled big time the last 2 years, and Sellers and the scheme has really bailed them out with the run game. And 2, we cannot forget. I just can't help but get over. They lost so many pieces on defense in the draft. It felt like they didn't put the offense together quite in time to make the playoff last year. But T.J. Sanders, Tonka Hemingway, Demetrius Knight, Nicky Manwari, O'Donnell Fortune. And there's some other good players coming back, right? DQ Smith and Jalen Kilgore. There's other good players. Brian Thomas Jr. is coming back. So
who's the other edge rusher they lost to? I'm blanking on the name. He won defensive player of the year. Oh my God.
Kyle Kennard. Kyle Kennard. Thank you, Eli. They had so many great defensive players last year. Sometimes that's why that's exactly why Eli's here. But I'm going to take the under. This team lost a lot, and I don't think that's getting talked about enough within all of the Lenora Sellers and Dylan Stewart hype. And yes, we're a part of that, especially with Stewart, but there's not nearly as much depth on this team as there was last year. And I'm worried, especially in the trenches, aside from Stewart, how that's going to hold up on both sides of the ball. I'm going to take the under 7.5. Wow.
See, this is actually, I've been on the fence for a lot of these. I was like, I'm taking the over for this team. I think 7.5 is low, man. I'm going over. I'm going 8. I'm going at least 8 wins for South Carolina.
They have an interesting schedule, I think, with a lot of 50-50 games. Even Virginia Tech week 1, I don't think that's going to be easy. It wasn't easy last year.
Clemson last game of the year, which is
actually
tough.
No, they didn't play Virginia Tech last year. I'm thinking of Vandy. But either way, I mean, Virginia Tech, Clemson out of conference at the end of the year is always
at LSU,
at
host
LSU,
Alabama.
There's a lot of 50-50 games. I actually do think that's a good number, but I don't know that this team's going to be as good as last year's team. They lost. There's so and these are guys that got drafted. Some of them high.
Yeah.
I mean, Kennard went in the 3rd round, right? T.J. Sanders went in the 2nd round to Buffalo. Hemingway got drafted. Knight went in the 2nd round. Eman Warrior. God, South Carolina took up like the whole 2nd round of the draft, actually, now that I think about it. This was like a top 3 to 5 defense last year. Stewart's great. He's going to be great. But as a unit, I don't know that they're a top 5 defense this year.
All right.
If Clayton White and those guys can prove me wrong, so be it. Feel free to go out there and do it. But they lost a boatload of veteran talent in this last draft.
I'm taking the over on this team right now. 17th hardest schedule in the country, which is about average in the SEC. I look at that schedule. I don't know if they're going to lose 5 games next year. So I'm going to say over for South Carolina. And will they be a playoff contender? Probably not. I probably won't pick them to be a playoff team for me next year. But they'll be in the mix of it for sure. And I think over 7.5 will be enough.
It's not a crash and burn situation. It's just that they're going to have to – there's a lot of almost 50-50 games here, and they have a lot less room for error than last year. And I need that offensive line to be better.
Yeah. All right. Next up in our SEC preview is a team that did make the college football playoff last year, and producer Eli's team right now, the Tennessee Volunteers. Yet another strong year for Tennessee under Josh Heupel. Volunteers made the first ever 12-team playoff before losing to the eventual national champion in Ohio State in the first round of that playoff. It was Tennessee's 3rd straight top 20 finish under Josh Heupel in the final AP poll, the Volunteers' best 3-year stretch of the entire 21st century. Tennessee's defense was a major reason why the program had so much success last year. They were 3rd in the nation in EPA per play. That side of the ball should once again be a strength in 2025, with many key players returning. Far more concerns on the offensive side of the ball, though, because superstar running back Dylan Sampson was drafted by the Cleveland Browns, and star quarterback Nico Iamaleava, who we think is a top 10 quarterback in the country, had a very highly publicized transfer to UCLA this offseason. So big question mark at running back a little bit, and then really at quarterback for Tennessee going into next year. But Dawn, once again, which is, again, weird to say for like a Lane Kiffin coach team we said before, and even a Josh Heupel team, the defense is really the best part of this program right now.
It is, but a lot of these defensive guys stuck around for this year, right? They lose James Pierce Jr., the best pass rusher, and Omar Norman-Lott might have been the 2nd best pass rusher, but they're bringing back a lot. Obviously, the Jermod McCoy injury hurts if he's going to miss most or all of this year, but you've got Josh Josephs, you've got Tyree West, you got a really interesting player to me in Colton Hood coming over from Colorado, right, at cornerback, and I think you still have the makings of what should be a very good defense that keeps you in ball games. We have really do you have any questions about that side of the ball? Really looking at it, because I don't have a whole lot of questions about Tennessee's defense.
Even without Jermod McCoy, it should still be a good second.
Yeah, they're going to keep themselves in games for sure. This offensively now becomes Josh Heupel's, maybe his greatest coaching task this year, especially after everything that's happened this spring. But their defense is still going to be really solid, especially with Josephs and those guys against the run.
That's the biggest question mark, is who will step up offensively, because they lose a top 10 quarterback in the country, Nico Iamaleava, who I don't care what anyone says, he was still a very good quarterback for Tennessee last year. They lose the SEC Offensive Player of the Year from last year in Dylan Sampson at running back. Their top 3 wide receivers are gone. 4 starters from the offensive line are gone too. Like I said, man, this is going to be got to be a great year for Josh Heupel as an offensive mastermind to really lead the Volunteers back to the college football playoff if they're going to make it back, because that offense has a lot of question marks right now. They brought in a 5-star recruit in David Sanders at offensive tackle. He probably will be starting at right tackle for Tennessee in his true freshman year. So we'll see how he does. But yeah, a lot of question marks offensively right now, and really, Dawn, the biggest one is at quarterback with a transfer coming in from UCLA. Kind of like maybe the first ever college football trade. You know, Nico Iamaleava goes to UCLA. UCLA quarterback Joey Aguilar goes to Tennessee.
Yeah, so yeah, I guess you could consider that. He was at UCLA for 3 months. That's college football in 2025. All right, so Aguilar is interesting because if you want somebody who can come in and is going to sling the deep ball, because that's what Josh Heupel does. He has all those switch releases, and he's looking to work the ball downfield with these go routes and switch releases and RPOs and deep posts and all of that. If you want someone who can theoretically be capable of doing that, you do have that in Joey Aguilar. He's not as good an athlete as Iamaleava, but you do have that. Over the last 2 years, he has the fourth most big-time throws in the country, 50 big-time throws over the last 2 years, because at App State, they kind of did a lot of similar things, a lot of play action, a lot of deep posts and seam routes and things that he's comfortable with. So he will sling it down the field. The problem really is that he will sling it anywhere. Here's my stat I have on that. So I have the big-time throws. That's the fun part. 51 turnover-worthy plays over the last 2 years also. 11 more than any other quarterback in the country.
Wow.
The next closest player has 40. So you want a gunslinger. You don't have anybody you could define as more of a gunslinger than Joey Aguilar. Now, he's got the arm. I'll tell you, he's got a good arm.
What you need in that offense.
He throws a nice go ball. He throws it down the seam, deep post, things like that well.
What you need in that offense.
In Josh Heupel's offense, it makes sense, right? And, of course, he's probably the only guy he could have gone and gotten considering Nico went to UCLA. But if you're wondering why Aguilar's grade comes out to, like last year, an average 71.9, it was a little higher the year before. I think he led App State to the Sun Belt title game. Vertical passer, he wants to hit home runs. Tennessee wants to hit home runs. It can work in theory. Ball security is everything with him. 31.8 passing grade under pressure over the last 2 seasons. Can they protect him? Is he going to panic under pressure? Can he protect the football? If he can, then Josh Heupel might have something to work with here because he's got a good arm and he wants to chuck it downfield.
And they love using the seams in that offense too. And one guy who should really help out Joey Aguilar in that respect is Miles Kitselman. Played a year at the JUCO level and then 2 years at Alabama as a backup, and he really broke out in his senior year at Tennessee last year. He's our number 7 tight end in college football going into next year. He finished last year actually as the 7th most valuable tight end in the country, according to our wins above average metric, and he's 4th among all tight ends returning to college football. One of 4 tight ends in the nation last year with top 25 PFF grades as both a receiver and as a run blocker. He has not dropped a pass in his college career yet, and he's a really, really good run blocker who's capable of displacing defenders at 256 pounds too. So one of, if not the best run blocking tight end we have in college football, Miles Kitselman, who's also a pretty capable receiver too.
No, he's fun. He's a lot of fun, and they even use him in kind of a fullback role too, kind of condensed in behind that offensive line in that in the formation. So I think Kitselman is a very important piece of both their run game and their passing game, and especially in the run game as a lead blocker. He plays a very important role in that offense. But no, it's going to be fun to see how Heupel puts this all together, losing Nico, losing Sampson especially. Those are the 2 big pieces. And then an offensive line that kind of struggled last year. They need to be better than they were last year.
They lost 4 starters last year, too, from that offensive line.
Yeah.
And their top 3 receivers,
This could go one of 2 ways on offense. And I know Eli might be a little nervous back there about this offense. But you know what? We have hope on defense. It's unfortunate that the best player on this defense, Jermod McCoy, is going to be out with a torn ACL for most, if not all, of this season after tearing it in January, but we wanted to highlight him anyways. Your number 2 corner in college football. If he does come back this season, he can prove why. And last year, transferring in from Oregon State, just spectacular. 89.6 coverage grade, 4 interceptions, lights out against pretty much anybody not named Jeremiah Smith. That's the only time I remember him getting torched last year. And look, there's no shame in that, man. It's going to be fine. But Jermod McCoy, if he can get back from this injury, he's an elite player. If he's going to go into next year's draft after having not played this season, then so be it. But definitely worth highlighting just how talented he is and how big a loss this could be for the secondary.
Listen, there's NFL corners that would get torched by Jeremiah Smith right now. So there's no shame.
He might be a top 10 receiver in the NFL right this minute.
Yeah, exactly. But Jermod McCoy, silly. Man, 2nd best coverage grade among returning power 4 corners too. Now, he did tear it in January. It's not like he tore it in spring ball, so maybe he can come back. He's usually like a 9 to 12 month injury, so I don't know. Maybe
we could see him. We could see him in the second half. It just depends. I don't know if we've heard any recent updates.
I haven't heard any updates, but every time we talk about him missing the season, there's always Tennessee fans saying, "No, he's going to play this year." So who knows? We'll see what Jermod McCoy. It did happen early enough that he has a shot of playing this year, and if he does, he's the number 1 cornerback in the draft, in our opinion, because our number 1 cornerback in the country is Leonard Moore, a true sophomore at Notre Dame, not eligible for next year. Ultimately, Dawn, What is the bottom line for Tennessee? Their win total right now is set at 8.5 right now. Is this a playoff contender once again, like they made the playoff last year, or is there too many question marks offensively for them to make it?
This isn't that. This is another one where the schedule is going to get me because it's not that bad, but I also have no idea what to expect from this offense. 8.5, is it?
Yeah. Whoa.
Yeah, this is tough.
That's a tough one. I just looked at the schedule.
This is a hard one too because they have a lot of winnable games, even with just their defense.
What is their power ranking for schedule?
Probably
55th hardest schedule. That is incredibly easy for the SEC.
Oh man, their defense alone is still better than a lot of the, and they were winning games like that last year anyway. Mm-hmm. Am I going with the 9? Because it would feel weird if they made the playoff this year. Josh Heupel might win Coach of the Year.
Oh, he should.
I just, without McCoy, new quarterback, and a gunslinging one at that. Georgia, Bama.
By the way, it's the easiest schedule in the SEC according to our power rankings, too.
It sure looks like it.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to find the other 2 games they would lose. They would have to lose to all of Georgia and Bama and Oklahoma and Florida.
Yeah. I think they won one of those games.
Dang it.
I'm going over. I don't even love them that much, but it's just that schedule's so easy. You got to go over.
Take the softer 9-3 over.
They'll win
because they're just more talented than so many of these teams.
They'll win.
But if Aguilar flops,
then they
have a major issue. Oh boy, that's a good number. God, the books.
Oh, but Cuse though. Cuse week 1.
Oh yeah, we're worried about that.
For anyone, by the way, who's wondering why I keep saying I'm a Syracuse alum, by the way, that's why I'm so high.
That's that one's allowed. That's just Max trying to hype himself up.
Battle of the Oranges. They have a better orange, by the way. I'll put that out there. Even as a Syracuse alum, they have a better orange than we do.
Okay.
Better looking orange.
I'm gonna ride in my gut. I'm still going under.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna do it. I'm the Aguilar thing works in theory, but I'm also I can't with a guy who puts the ball in danger that much. I'm not gonna do it. I'll take the under.
Good stat from
I'll go away from you.
Dog in DC in the chat right now. Tennessee has not won in the swamp against Florida since 2003. They're at Florida this year.
Okay, all right. So it's going to come down to the Oklahoma game. So
yeah.
or maybe Arkansas. I shouldn't count out Arkansas.
I beat them last year.
Better
team last year
I'm
too.
going under. Good stat. Love that. I got
shout out Dog in DC.
I got a chat stat. I'm going with it.
Hopefully he's right. I haven't even checked the validity of that stat.
Well, I'm going with it now. It's a chat stat. It's in the chat.
All right, we got Trevor in the chat too right now saying go Gators.
That's actually Trevor's burner.
That's Trevor's burner. I'm going over. That schedule's too easy. I'm going over. I think they'll get 9-3. There won't be a playoff team like they were last year, but I do think that schedule's just so easy, man. I think they'll go 9-3. All right, next up, big one. Texas Longhorns up next. Texas has finally turned into a perennial national title contender. So many people keep saying Texas is back, Texas is back. They were never back until the last 2 years, really, under Steve Sarkisian. They have now made back-to-back college football playoff semifinals. The first time since 2008 and 2009 that the Longhorns have finished in the top 15 of the AP poll in consecutive years. And they were in the top 4 of the AP poll in both of the last 2 years, too. Quinn Ewers is gone, and it is finally Arch Manning time now down there at Texas. The next in line to his family's quarterback dynasty has a lot of hype on him right now. And he looked pretty good last year in relief of Quinn Ewers, went down with an injury, had an 88 PFF grade in 2 starts last year. But Dalton, brand new offensive line in front of him right now. Still has a top 10 running back unit, still has a top 10 receiving core to rely on. And as exciting as Arch Manning is, the story of this team last year and the story of this team this upcoming year too, that defense is freaking loaded, man. And it should be, once again, one of the best defenses in college football.
Boy, what Pete Kwiatkowski has on this defense, and even with the pieces that they lost over the last 2 years, really, but Colin Simmons coming back, Trey Moore, Anthony Hill, Malik Muhammad, Michael Taff, and they've got a boatload of talent coming in behind those guys. This is the reason, first and foremost, even more so than having a Manning at quarterback where you go, okay, that's an elite football team. They had the highest coverage grade in the country last year. They were the only team that held Jeremiah Smith down in that playoff game. They didn't lose that game because of their defense. They only gave up 21 to Ohio State defensively, and then you had the Jack Sawyer scoop and score. But I think when you look at Texas, first and foremost, I know Manning's going to get all the cameras and spotlight and flash. but it's their defense that makes them elite. This is no question a top 5 defense in the country with several possible first-round talents. That's where you look first when you look at the success of this Texas Longhorn team, and then they're going to try to get the offense catching up to that with Manning. And you're right, it's a very young offense, but if they are able to catch up to this defense in a matter of time, in time for SEC, hardcore competition there as they're trying to get in the SEC title game again, then you're talking about a national title contender.
Absolutely. Yeah, Texas, one of 4 schools in America, as a top 10 defensive line, linebacker unit, and secondary in my rankings. In fact, the number 1 linebacker unit and the number 1 secondary in my rankings too. And just to kind of spoil a future article coming out on PFF.com, I'm ranking the top 10 offenses and top 10 defenses in college football. Texas has the number 2 defense in the country for me, behind Alabama. So loaded defense for Texas going
ahead
next year.
You put them ahead of Clemson?
I did.
Oh, wow.
I know,
okay.
It's tough.
All right, we'll have that argument later. But
yeah.
Wow, I was surprised you put them ahead of Clemson's darn good, too.
Now, listen, Texas last year had one of the best defenses in college football, and they should once again have that this year. What they also had last year, Dalton, was arguably the best offensive line in college football, but they lost a lot from that offensive line from last year. 4 of the 5 starters are gone, and Kelvin Banks Jr., Jake Majors, Hayden Connor, and Cameron Williams. Kelvin Banks, one of the best tackles in the country, the number 9 overall pick in the 2025 NFL Draft. They do have some intriguing talent replacing them, especially Trevor Gooseby, who's getting a lot of hype right now for the 2026 NFL Draft, and Brandon Baker at tackle, who's a former 5-star recruit too. But they're pretty unproven right now. So Texas had the best O-line in the country last year, in my opinion, but they lost 4 starters from that unit. Still very talented up front, but a lot of unproven and inexperienced players up front too.
For sure. I think it's the theme of this Texas offense, and I might as well just go right into it with Arch Manning because, look, even though he's a Manning and he had 2 starts last year in place of Quinn Ewers, that's the theme is inexperience. But when he's been on the field,
yeah,
he darn well looks the part. 88 overall grade last year in limited work, a little over 200 snaps, 108 dropbacks. And I just keep going back to the best way we can put this is that he's a Manning that can run. He's accurate. His mechanics are clean. He's generally on time with the football. He goes through his progressions because you already know he's been on the whiteboard for his whole life. And he's a better athlete than either of the 2 Mannings that came before him in Peyton and Eli. And you talk about, what is it, a 67-yard touchdown run he had last year in one of those starts. So
Eli and Peyton would never dream of that, by the way.
No.
They would never dream of that.
Oh, no, hell, neither would I. But, I mean, you're talking about a guy who's a plus athlete, super accurate, can see the field well, throws on time. I just think the one thing we can point to is inexperience. I mean, the only other thing is that he had a 40 passing grade under pressure last year, but super small sample size. Yeah. I mean, you're talking about, and a guy who was not getting all of the reps with the ones in the offseason. Now he is. Quinn Ewers is gone. Arch is the starter. Still probably could have made an argument to leave him in there, but it was Quinn Ewers' team. It is what it is. That's last year. This is somebody who can do everything on a football field. And again, he just has to go out there and do it week after week. But I think it's every bit justified to think about whenever he comes out being the number 1 overall pick. We just got to see him do it.
Trevor Sycamore, who's in the chat right now, our lead draft analyst here at PFF, he has him as the number 1 quarterback in next year's draft, and I agree with him.
Yeah, why not?
I think he is, and I know it's a very small sample size, and I know some people are saying how we had him number 50 on our college 50 list, our number 6 quarterback. Like, how can you put him at that high? It's like,
I mean, honestly, it's probably the least analytical thing I do in this building, but I just sit here. He's a Manning.
Yeah.
What do you want? He's a Manning that can. He's a Manning that's an athlete.
Yeah, he got his grandpa's athleticism and his dad's athleticism too. Cooper Manning was a great receiver before he went down that neck injury. But.
Right. I mean, he's got everything. We just got to see it for 12 games instead of a handful. I mean, it's just he's Arch Manning.
All eyes. Yeah. That is the most.
Is there anybody under more pressure than Arch Manning?
No. But hey, listen, his dad. I mean, his uncles were both under immense pressure too. As you know, the sons of Archie Manning, they live up to the hype too. Who knows with Arch Manning? All we've known so far from that family is elite quarterback play, and we'll see if he can live up to that in his first year as a starter. Dawn, he's going to have a guy he's going to have as a security blanket in Jack Endries, who is, in my opinion, the second best tight end in college football going into next year. Started his career as a walk-on at California, and now is the number 2 tight end in college football. Over 1,000 receiving yards over the last 2 years. That is 6th among all tight ends over the last 2 years, and most among all returning tight ends who play for a Power 4 school in that span. Very strong hands for the position. Only dropped 1 pass in 2024. Caught 9 of his 12 contested targets too. he'll just be the security blanket for Arch Manning. They got plenty of other guys that could really push the ball downfield, like Ryan Wingo in that receiving core, but I'm a huge fan of Jack Andrews, and in my opinion, he's one of the best tight ends we have in the country.
Absolutely. I mean, look, you could not find a better replacement, especially for the style player that Gunnar Helm was for this team. And only other thing I have, shout out to his dad, who's a big fan of the show.
He is?
Yeah.
Yeah. Robert Andrews, I think. Right?
Absolutely.
Great dude. Yeah.
So.
All right, you want to talk about our number one edge rusher going into next year?
Absolutely. We just had one freak in South Carolina and Dylan Stewart. Now we got Colin Simmons here at Texas. And look, this team is loaded with defensive stars, but Colin Simmons and what he did as a true freshman last year as well, just incredible stuff, right? When you're talking about an 82.5 PFF grade, a 73.4 run defense grade, that young 18.6 pressure rate as a pass rusher, just a ridiculously good freshman season. You've brought up the comps possibly even to Von Miller as that outside linebacker is just so well built and has the arsenal to him. There was a big rotation of guys on that defensive line last year, but I've said it before, I'll say it again. If you choose to block Colin Simmons one-on-one, I don't know what you're doing. That's all I have for it, because between him and Dylan Stewart right now, they're the two best pass rushers in the country. Freaks coming up as true sophomores. Simmons, just everything you could want in a stand-up outside linebacker. I mean, there's not a whole lot of flaws other than just keep getting more reps. I mean, to be a true freshman and to be the sixth most valuable edge rusher in the country, that's with some of the names in front of him, just silly. I mean, he's another one who you just go, again, this 2027 draft class, it's going to be nuts. But, I mean, the arsenal, the burst, the bend, even the ability at times, if you wanted him to drop back and cover, he's a good enough athlete. He can do it all, man. I mean, it's going to be a freaky season for him.
You mentioned him being the sixth most valuable edge rusher last year. The five above him were Abdul Carter, Jack Sawyer, Mike Green, Josiah Stewart, and JC Tuimoloau. All those guys are in the NFL right now.
All those guys drafted in the first. Jack Sawyer went in the fourth round.
4 rounds, yeah.
And still, my opinion, shouldn't have. But, I mean, you're talking about superstars.
And, again, Dalton and I disagree with this award, but he did win Sean Alexander Freshman of the Year over Jeremiah Smith, who had arguably the best freshman season of all time. So even if the fact that there's even an argument for that award just shows how good of a player Colin Simmons was in his true freshman year at Texas. Dalton, it feels like a lot of people are picking Texas to win it all next year. Their win total right now is 9.5 on FanDuel. So I think if you're taking the under on that, you're saying it's going to be a disastrous year for Texas next year, considering how much hype they have going into next year. What is the bottom line? Are you taking the over or under for that win total? And can this team win a national title next year?
I'm over. I'm buying. I'm buying Manning. I'm buying the defense. I'm taking it. I mean, if they're another one, there's tough games here. Ohio State, Florida, Georgia, who they could not beat last year. That's the big hurdle. A&M at the end of the year, but they get them at home. I mean, they got a couple of tough road games. We'll be in Columbus week 1 watching that. That's going to be a fun one, but I'll take the over. I'm going to go with it. I even wonder with them with their schedule, depending on which the losses there are, if they would be a 9-3 playoff contender. And even then, I'll take the over. 10-2. This defense, and I'm buying Arch Manning with this. I think personally, they're one of the 2 best teams in the conference. That's where I'm going. I think they make the SEC title game. I think 10-2 is extremely realistic and possibly better than that. We'll find out a lot. Another one, we'll find out a lot week 1 at Ohio State. If they win that game, they're setting themselves up. And even just from not even looking ahead at the numbers, you go, if they walk into Ohio State and win, look out. Yeah. If Arch Manning does that in his first start this season, man.
I'd probably say they're the best team in the SEC right now. It's close between them and Alabama, in my opinion. But that's an easy over for me, too. I don't see any way they go 9-3 next year, unless it's a complete disaster. I think Arch Manning, if he can live up to that last name he's got, Texas has the surrounding talent, both offensively and, more importantly, defensively. They have that kind of talent to win their first national title since Vince Young and the Longhorns did it 20 years ago, 2005.
The one real road to it is that their offense is just so young.
Yeah.
Quarterbacks and receivers, for the most part, and offensive line is that it's just so young that they do trip once or twice. Maybe they lose the Ohio State game, but can they get it back together over the next month to play the Floridas and the Oklahomas of the world? You're back. It's SEC competition. You got to do this. So that's really the one question. If you had a biggest weakness for me, and you mentioned the offensive line, it's just youth all over their offense.
And it's worth mentioning, too, we haven't even talked about it yet. They have a great run game, too. Trey Wisner's back for another year.
C.J. Baxter coming back. That might be the biggest thing working to their advantage. And getting injuries in the portal was huge. But Wisner and Baxter, There's not many better pairs than that. That's nice.
I had Texas as the number 3 running back unit in the country, and the only 2 above them were Penn State and Notre Dame, who are pretty clearly the top 2.
Trey Wisner does not get enough credit for what he did.
He had
for
over
this
1,000
team.
yards last year.
He does not get enough credit for what he did for this team.
He had over
last year.
1,000 yards, and he was supposed to be the number 2 running back last year because C.J. Baxter was supposed to be the starter, and he went down with a season-ending injury before in the preseason. Now Baxter's back, and you have Trey Wisner too. I believe Connor Rogers, Trevor Sikkema did their running backs episode for NFL Stock Exchange. They both had Wisner and Baxter as like 2 of the top 15 or so backs in the draft next year.
Oh, so, no. What Wisner did last year does not get talked about enough.
Yeah.
Because that could have been a mess in the backfield after Baxter got hurt so early.
We're not spoiling our season predictions yet, but we both agree Texas could compete for a national title next year.
For now, I will spoil at least in the SEC title game.
Okay.
That's as far as I'll go.
But they are a national title contender too, you'll say.
Oh, yeah, contender, sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that leaves some ambiguity. I'm good with that. You wait till August for the hard predictions.
All right. 2 more schools here in the SEC, one of them being the Texas A&M Aggies. First-year head coach last year in Mike Elko. Really solid first season with the Aggies. Led Texas A&M to an 8-5 record, their best record in 3 years. Making that even more impressive was the fact that redshirt freshman Marcel Reed started most of the year at quarterback, despite entering the season as the backup. He's a dynamic runner who got a little bit better as a passer to really take the next step for Texas A&M in that offense. But they lost some key defensive linemen in the NFL too. But they do have one of the best linebackers in the country and in the draft in Torian York, and a solid defensive line in front of him. Texas A&M will need its secondary to improve, though. They only had 98th best coverage grade last year at 67.3. But Dawn, this offense might have the best run game in all of college football.
I mean, you just look at the names in this backfield: Marcel Reed, Le'Veon Moss, right? Then you think about Kevin Concepcion, who's a dynamic runner who could get in the backfield if he wanted to. I know he's a receiver, but he can get in the backfield. It looks natural. Terry Bussey, you can handle. The number of jet sweeps and jet actions you're going to see in this offense because you have those 2 guys, and then you have Moss and Reed in the backfield. There are going to be teams certain weeks that have a hard time just finding the football against Texas A&M, and what Colin Klein now can do with Marcel Reed established as the starter. Now, Reed was up and down last year. He gave him a jolt with his athleticism, but we have to remember, he didn't go into last season as the starter. It was Connor Wegman, and Reed did a lot of nice work, beating Florida, right? Came in, led the comeback against LSU, beat that team. So I think you're talking about a potentially dynamic running game with the offensive line. You talk guys like Trey Zune and Armaj Reed Adams that can really maul people up front. Mike Elko and Colin Klein they're building a very physical team here, right, on both sides of the ball. But I think especially offensively, they're going to run the living hell out of the football this year.
The number 3 offensive line in the country for us, the number 5 running back unit in the country for us, and probably the 2 best rushers at wide receiver in the country, and Kevin Concepcion and Terry Bussey too.
An odd category, but you're not wrong.
And then Marcel Reed is like a top 5 rusher at quarterback, probably.
And a healthy Le'Veon Moss.
And I
shouldn't forget about Amari Daniels either.
And Ruben Owens. And
I mean, they've got
Smith is there too.
They've got guys. I mean, I wonder if there's going to be games where they just don't even bother throwing the football.
Yeah.
I know coaches like that. We used to have that down running the wing T in St. Pete. If Coach Fab didn't have to throw the football, he would not do it.
Colin Klein's a perfect OC for that kind of offense.
Darn right he is.
The way he ran that Kansas State offense, absolutely. Now, it's kind of the same with Missouri in their preview. Do they have the passing game to complement that run game? Because Marcel Reed last year, yes, he did come in as what should have been the backup quarterback, but a 64.6 passing grade last year, only 114th in the country, 29.4 passing grade under pressure, was the 4th worst in the Power 4. Listen, you mentioned before, got the running backs, got a great offensive line, got the receivers now too. He just has to take the next step as a passer, Dalton. And what did you see from him when you watched the tape?
A lot of good things, honestly, for such a young kid coming in a high-pressure environment when he wasn't supposed to start. And look, the first thing you notice, dynamic runner, one of just 8 quarterbacks in the country with 300 rushing yards on design runs and as a scrambler. So he can do it either way, and you can add him into the option game with that. That part's dynamic. 22 explosive runs, 17 missed tackles forced on just 108 carries, both really solid numbers for a quarterback. And to me, what I saw from his best throws was being able to throw down the middle of the field. 80.5 passing grade with 12 of his 15 touchdowns coming between the numbers. So I think it's going to be about those option looks and then attacking down the seams. And obviously Colin Klein's going to add the screen game in there as well with some of those athletes athletes he's got, but that's what I see as a dangerous athlete who likes to throw down the middle. The big thing that really drags everything down is the play under pressure. I get it. He was young, high-pressure environment, trying to compete in the SEC, 29.4 passing grade under pressure last year. And look, he's athletic enough to create. He can do some things on the move. He's playing really good defenses every week. I think that's what you just need to see is sometimes in the pocket, a little bit more poise and not being, so willing to run outside the pocket so often. So I just think when you look at Reed, get the poise, get a whole offseason. You're the guy now, right? Just calm down, make the plays you're supposed to. Don't try to do too much under pressure because you got a ton of athletes around you who can make plays. I think with this supporting cast, he could make a big jump this season because it's not so improvised when it comes to him playing. Oh, Wegman's hurt. All right, you got to get in there. Oh, Wegman's not playing well against LSU. You got to get in there. Now it's just his team, and I think he's going to benefit a lot from that.
We actually have Chris Cobb in the chat saying Marcel Reed will be in New York for the Heisman ceremony next year. That's a call right there for Chris Cobb. I like that.
That's a long shot call.
Colin Klein was in New York, wasn't he, for the Heisman ceremony?
He was.
Yeah.
I forget which year that was, but he was. That is,
I believe it was
I'll say this.
Manziel year.
Over the next month and a half, we will hear crazier things than that. Because with the way that Reed can run the football and potentially run this offense with all these guys around him, that's not the craziest thing we're going to hear this summer.
Dog in DC, the good question, saying, well, they lost the top receiver last year, Noah Thomas, who transferred over to Georgia. How would that affect them? I will say A&M did a great job in the portal of addressing wide receiver. They added Kevin Concepcion, who's a top 10 receiver in the country for me from NC State. And Mario Craver had a great freshman year last year at Mississippi State, too. Only about 400 receiving yards, but I thought he was really, really good and got open a lot last year and wasn't really taken advantage of enough. And then Terry Bussey, entering his true sophomore year, 5-star recruit coming out of high school, just could do anything for an offense, a rusher or a receiver. Yeah, of course, Noah Thomas and his size at 6'6" is going to hurt losing that, and they don't really have that kind of size right now at receiving core. But what they do have is a lot of really great athletes.
They got burners.
And Amari Niblack at tight end, too.
They've got burners, man. They've got some guys who can fly.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about the star, though, of the offense. It's not from that receiving core or in that running back unit. It's actually in the offensive line. And the best offensive guard in the country right now is Armaj Reed Adams, who transferred in from Kansas last year. And he was second among all guards in the Power 4 in overall grade, run blocking grade, and wins above average metric. Dawn, the only one who's above him in all three of those metrics. Our king, Willie Lampkin.
Oh, of course, Willie.
Our king.
How could I forget Willie?
And you can't live up to that kind of legend right there. So it's understandable.
L.A. Ram, Willie Lampkin.
Of course, Willie Lampkin. So Armaj Reed Adams is only behind Willie Lampkin in PFF grade, run blocking grade, and wins above average. Powerful player, 6'5", 330 pounds. He can excel in any run blocking scheme. In fact, he led all Power 4 guards last year in gap run blocking grade, and he was fourth in zone blocking grade too. So Armaj Reed Adams with that run game with Marcel Reed and those running backs and even those receivers, Armaj Reed Adams running behind him and the rest of what should be a great offensive line. I think they brought back all of their top 6 offensive linemen from last year from already a great O-line. That is going to be the heart and soul of this team next year.
It is hard not to buy this rushing attack for multiple reasons, for sure. And I'll tell you what Texas A&M does too. They stop the run.
Yeah.
And that starts with the captain of their defense, your number 2 linebacker in college football. I know the number 1 linebacker in Trevor Sycam's heart, if he's still watching. Torian York, the middle linebacker, look through 2 seasons as a true freshman and true sophomore. He's been nothing short of fantastic. Since 2023, 59 run defense stops, most in the Power 4, right? So you're talking about a guy just really instincts beyond his years, excellent tackler, could get a little bit better in coverage, but that'll get there. I think, did Trevor throw a Nick Bolton comp in there?
Yeah, he did.
That's high praise. I mean, you're talking about a 2-time Super Bowl.
Legendary Missouri player.
2-time Super Bowl champion, legendary college player. So when you're talking about somebody like Nick Bolton, for a guy who's just going into his true junior year as a linebacker at Texas A&M, it's a leader of a really good defense, right? And I think they do need to clean up some things you mentioned in coverage as well, but got a lot of talent. They have York. They have Scooby Williams next to him. I know you're high on Cassius Howell. They have Will Lee in the secondary still, the blanket. They got some other transfers on that defense. So I think you're talking about a team that got a lot of balance. They just have to put it together and win the big games.
Absolutely. They got TJ Searcy transferring in too at edge. Tyler Onyedin, kind of a down year at Iowa State last year. I believe he battled injuries last year. 2023 was great though at Iowa State. So you got him transferring at D tackle too. Should be a great defense. And of course, Mike Elko, a great defensive coach too.
Absolutely.
They're always gonna have a pretty good defense. And then the other question is, can the passing game kind of complement what should be an elite run game next year too? Trevor even saying Torrey York Hive right now in the chat right now. Dawn, I'll come out first and say it. 7.5 is way too low for this win total. I'm going over.
Yeah, it's a tough schedule, but that seems off.
I think it's a top 15 team in the country that could compete for a playoff.
I could be in on that. I could see them winning 9 or 10 games. I'm in on over 7.5. I don't know if that's an old number, if that needs to be tweaked, or if there's something they know that we don't know. But I get it. Look, Notre Dame, week 3 is going to be a tough game.
Notre Dame, yeah.
Although, if you were talking about a physical defense, that was a close game last year. It's not like they got blown out by Notre Dame last year. They could beat Notre Dame, especially with Notre Dame's quarterback situation. And then I go, okay, Florida, yeah, LSU. Yeah, they beat LSU last year. Mm-hmm. I don't know if they played Missouri last year, but
Auburn could be tough. That's at A&M.
Sure. You get South Carolina at home.
At Texas, the last game of the year is tough.
That is what it is. But if 7.5 is the number, I'm taking the over.
It's still 7.5 too. We'll see how the standings shake out after we get all this going, but they're probably a top 5 team in the SEC for me. I would say so. I would say they're a top 15 team in the country easily, and I think, they could be a playoff contender if Marcel Reed develops as a passer and new pieces on defense step up.
Is it just that part? Is it just Reed they're doubting?
I don't know.
Because I think established with a full offseason as the starter, I think he could actually get a lot better in this.
Yeah.
Because you have to remember, you go into a season with Connor Wigman last year, who's a lot different than Reed. Completely different quarterback. Now you're building this thing around him, and this is the type of player Colin Klein wants.
Yes,
right. So I'm in on this. I'm in over 7.5.
7.5 that's just crazy.
Yeah, I'm as sure on that one as I've been on any of these today.
Over's like minus 170, but still, that's a really low line for Texas A&M. I would have said like at least 8.5. Probably not 9.5, but that's still,
or at least lengthen the odds a little bit. I mean, man, I'm in on that.
They could be a playoff contender.
If they don't win 8 games, they have a problem.
No, they absolutely could be a college football playoff contender next year if, again, Marcel Reed develops more as a passer. But like I said, they have all of the surrounding talent offensively for him to really take a next step next year and his first real season as a starter. All right, final one here on the SEC preview
we're getting turned.
Well, yeah, of course. We're getting the Vanderbilt Commodores right now. One of the best Cinderella stories in college football last year. Clark Lee, a lot of people thought he was almost guaranteed to get fired last year at Vanderbilt. They turned it around, though. Their first winning season with a 7-6 record, their first winning season since 2013, which was James Franklin's final year leading the Commodores before he took the Penn State head coaching job. One of those 7 victories was the greatest win in program history over number 1 Alabama. And leading really that revival last year, Dawn, was a pair of New Mexico State transfers in quarterback Diego Pavia and tight end Eli Stowers. Both of them are back for another year. If they want to take even the next step next year, the defense got a lot better, but you see on the screen right there, the best quarterback tight end pairing that we have in this entire sport.
And don't forget their New Mexico State head coach, Jerry Kill, is on that coaching staff too. But that's really what it was, is look, this team, they weren't the best team in college football last year, but they might have been the most fun to watch, right? They've got this dynamic running game led by Pavia in the backfield. Eli Stowers, a former Texas A&M recruit at quarterback, a 4-star quarterback coming out of high school, switches positions because he lost the job to Pavia at New Mexico State, and he's a really good athlete at tight end. He has a good, solid year at New Mexico State there, and then an incredible year last year at Vandy. So I think, you look at these two guys really being the driving force of this, and it doesn't sound like much, but it's really about Pavia being the leader that he is and just the toughest guy and the most fun guy to watch on the football field any given week. So really not being afraid of anybody. They got a dynamic run game, and he can really throw the ball vertically down the field too.
Our number 8 quarterback in the country, Diego Pavia. Our number 1 tight end in the country, and Eli Stowers is the only other school with a top 10 quarterback and top 10 tight end. It was one we just talked about before too in Texas with Arch Manning and Jack Andrews. They're going to rely on those two a lot next year. The defense, can it perform at even an average level? So Vanderbilt's offense took a major step forward last year with Diego Pavia and Eli Stowers. The same cannot really be said for its defense. The Commodores were 104th in defensive EPA per play last year. They have been 100th or worse in defensive EPA per play 8 straight years now. So they have been basically one of the 30 or so worst defenses in the country 8 straight years now. And making matters worse, is the fact that their two highest graded defensive players, safeties DeRicky Wright and CJ Taylor, are no longer with the program either. So this has been a horrendous defense for nearly a decade now, and just lose your two highest graded defensive players too. They need their defense to take the next step this year.
Yeah, it's tough because they only had 4 games where they gave up less than 24 points, and that was to some of the softer opponents on their schedule, right? So you're talking about a defense that does need to catch up, and I think my biggest concern really on both sides of the ball is their offensive and defensive lines for that matter. The defensive line, they were decent last year, especially in run defense, but struggled to rush the passer, and then their offensive line 124th in the country in PFF grade as a unit. So Pavia was really working around a lot when it comes to playing well under pressure and even getting success in the run game. But if their defense can match up with that, then we start talking about, okay, they start to match the efforts of what they had last year. But we also have to remember down the stretch, as things got harder for their offense, they couldn't win those low-scoring type of games. So that's something that does have to get better.
All right, let's talk about the most electric quarterback in college football, and Diego Pavia, who actually gave Trevor Sikkema's wife now, Alyssa Lang, the most electric post-game interview last year, too, when they beat Alabama. Dawn, besides just being electric off the field, what should we know about Diego Pavia on the field?
Well, he brings it on the field. It's toughness, right? It's just that same sort of just pissed off, you're not beating me personality. He brings it out there with them. Led all Power 4 quarterbacks in rushing yards after contact and missed tackles forced, right? He's going to be part of this option-heavy, weird kind of offense that he runs. I don't want to say like a Taysom Hill bit. I think that's a name that Trevor's brought up with Pavia sometimes, but kind of where it's like that. But he's a solid passer too, especially when you talk about vertically down the field to complement the run game and getting those play action passes going deep down the field. And the bigger thing with all of it is that a ball control offense needs a quarterback who doesn't give the ball away. Pavia doesn't do that. 1.3% turnover worthy play rate last season, top 5 in the country. So when you have a guy who's running the ball well, who's throwing it deep well to complement it, and then doesn't turn the football over, doesn't put it in danger, you can win ball games because that's a team all of a sudden that doesn't beat themselves. Now, he's undersized. He's not that accurate when it comes to underneath stuff and horizontal throws especially. And over his last 7 games, only completed just over 52% of his passes. So he's not a traditional pocket passer by any means, but in this offense to make the vertical throws that he needs to. And then obviously the driving force is his legs and the run game and the schemes that come off of it. Pavia's a dangerous dual threat player.
He absolutely is. Yeah, he's a fantastic quarterback in college football. Now, of course, his NFL evaluation won't be maybe the best because of his size and maybe lack of really tools and arm strength, but he's an awesome college player. And maybe he could make some money in the NFL as a long-term backup, or maybe even switch to tight end too, like the next player on this list did, Eli Stowers, going from quarterback to tight end. And now Eli Stowers is the best tight end in college football right now. No returning tight end in college football has been more valuable than Eli Stowers over the last 2 years, according to our wins above average metric. Elite athlete. He placed above the 99th percentile in our game athleticism score metric. That movement ability makes him incredibly dangerous after the catch. He was 3rd among Power 4 tight ends last year with 13 forced missed tackles and was 4th in yards after the catch with 373. And like I said before, in my opinion, the best returning tight end in college football. And for the first time ever, he was the first ever Vanderbilt Commodore to be a number 1 player at their position entering the year in PFF's rankings.
Well deserved.
So, yeah, Eli Stowers, stud, man.
Well deserved. Electric player, really darn good athlete, and only just now, I know he's got to get a little bit bigger too for the NFL game, but only just figuring out now how to play the position, right, when it comes to blocking and even some route details. But an electric athlete who's had a wild road to getting to this point, but fantastic football player, no question.
So obviously, Dalton, a lot of question marks with Vanderbilt's defense next year, and they lost their 2 highest graded defenders, but they brought back their 3rd highest graded defender in Miles Capers. You can highlight here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's good if you're going to try to build your defense, it's good to build it around veterans, and an edge defender like Miles Capers, only 235 pounds, but a solid pass rusher, good hand usage, good first step. And if there's a guy who's going to make an impact as a pass rusher on this team, it's going to be Capers. 75.2 pass rush grade last year. The signature play was the strip sack of Jalen Milroe late in the Alabama game that really started to turn that game on its head late. It was upside down the entire way, but that really started to put it away for him. So I think when you talk about, again, when you have a young defense that's trying to figure things out, you lean on your veterans, and Miles Capers is going to be that guy on the defensive line for Vanderbilt.
Absolutely. So, Dawn, after an incredible 7-6 season, and they brought back their two best players in Diego Pavia and Eli Stowers, their win total is still only 4.5 right now. 16th hardest schedule in college football. So Vegas is still saying, all right, you got to prove it again, Vandy. We're not going to just buy in on this 1 year after having, a bunch of horrendous years before that. Do you think they go over or under that win total? Will they make a bowl game next year? What do you think for the Vanderbilt Commodores?
I think I'm leaning over.
I'm going over too.
5.5 would have been harder, I think. But I see 1, 2, 3, 4 games here I think they should win. Find me one more. Pavia guts out one more. At 4.5, I'll go over. Yeah. I'll go 5 sounds closer to right to me, and they could still make a bowl game because Pavia and Stowers could will them there. I could be in on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
They ended the season kind of cold, but I like that they bounced back in the bowl game and beat Georgia Tech. That was a fun game to watch too. I'll at 4.5, I'll go over. They're going to be a borderline bowl team again. They don't have a ton of depth, and I worry about them in the trenches. But when you have Pavia as your quarterback, I can't doubt you too much.
Yeah. And Eli Stowers, too. I mean, the combination of Pavia and Stowers, that might be enough for Vanderbilt to go bowling once again, but the defense just provide any sort of support for the offense right now because, it like I said before, it's been pretty horrendous for almost a decade.
We're going to be spending all year making them one of our upset picks. What week is Vandy going to pull off the home run upset?
Well, hey,
nobody saw that Alabama game
Charleston
coming.
Southern, you got Virginia Tech, who it'll be a close
Big game. That's a huge game for them.
Yeah, Georgia State, Utah State, you got Kentucky late in the year at home, too. Yeah, I can see 5 wins on schedule.
Virginia Tech's going to be pissed off too because Vandy beat them last year. They're going to be mad in that game in Blacksburg.
So yeah, I'll go over 4.5 for Vanderbilt. It's a tough schedule, but I think they'll get enough to go over. So, want to thank you guys. This has been legitimately a 3-hour show for us here on the College Football Show. I know our producers back there, and Eli and Ty, I really want to thank them for being there.
Oh, they want to kill us. We told them we'd keep it under, and we blew it.
We're like, 2.5 hours now.
Over under 3 hours on the next episode.
Over because Big Ten has more teams. 2 more teams.
Oh, sorry, guys.
So it's going over. But I want to thank you guys for watching this. Because this is a 3-hour show, and we usually do 1-hour shows, there will not be a Thursday episode. We'll just instead be releasing all these teams' previews in their own individual videos. Next Monday will be the Big Ten preview live on this channel. So make sure you guys subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of that. Of course, we are previewing all 68 Power 4 teams entering the 2025 season that we just wrapped up the SEC. Next week, the Big Ten, then the Big 12, then the ACC, and of course, Notre Dame is going to be included as well. But a ton of more previews coming on this channel. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of those. For our producers back there, for Dalton Wassman, I'm Max Shattuck. We'll see you guys next Monday with our full preview of every single Big Ten team entering the 2025 season.